The obedience default switch. You like to think you're in control, that every decision you make is yours, that your beliefs are rooted in reason, that when you agree, it's because you've thought it through. But beneath all that, behind the curtain of awareness, there's a hidden switch. One you didn't flip, one that flips you. The obedience default switch. It's ancient, subconscious, automatic. It kicks in when you're tired, when you're uncertain, when you're in a room with someone who sounds confident. You nod, you agree, you follow. Not because it's right, but because it feels safe. This is the obedience reflex, the primal instinct wired into your brain to prioritize survival over truth. It whispers, blend in, don't question, go along. Because questioning meant danger, meant exile, meant death. And your biology never forgot. So now, in the modern world, this ancient reflex still governs you. You say yes before thinking, nod before analyzing, obey before questioning. Not because you're weak, but because your brain equates comfort with authority, even in silence. A teacher speaks, you take notes. A leader commands, you follow protocol. A trend emerges, you conform, even if it grates against your values, because discomfort feels like risk. And authority, even fake authority, feels like a warm, quiet place to hide. The most dangerous part? You don't notice it. The switch is invisible. It lives in micro decisions, in tone, in posture, in silence. You're in a meeting, someone says something wrong, but no one reacts, and so you don't either. The room becomes a feedback loop of passive agreement, all because no one wants to be the first to break the spell. That's the switch. And when it's active, truth dies by silence. History is filled with horrors committed by people who were just following orders. But those orders didn't need guns or threats. Most of the time, all they needed was an atmosphere, a shared, unspoken agreement that it's easier to comply than to resist. And that atmosphere still surrounds you, in schools, in families, in workplaces, on social media. You learn which truths are welcome, which questions are tolerated, which opinions must be buried beneath polite obedience. And slowly the mind adjusts. It doesn't even fight anymore, because resistance takes energy. Obedience feels like peace, but that peace comes with a price. You lose yourself. You become a mirror, reflecting what others want, what the culture demands, what the algorithm rewards. You forget how to ask, do I actually believe this? Do I really agree? Or did I just nod because it was easier? That's the real tragedy, not forced obedience, voluntary submission. Because once the switch is on, you stop recognizing your own voice. It's drowned out by the hum of consensus. And soon, you're not just obeying others, you're obeying the version of yourself that never questions. That version is safe, but it's not free. So how do you fight it? You don't scream. You don't rebel for the sake of rebellion. You start smaller. You pause. In that space between stimulus and response, that's where the truth lives. That's where awareness can interrupt the switch. Someone asks you to agree. Pause. A trend demands your allegiance. Pause. A belief feels too easy, too smooth, too widely accepted. Pause. Ask, why do I believe this? What would happen if I didn't? Who benefits from my silence? That's the real revolution. Not in noise, but in awareness, because the obedience switch only controls you when you're asleep. Wakefulness is defiance, not loud, not violent, but steady, clear. It's the decision to think before nodding, to observe before agreeing, to question even the quietest commands, especially the ones that come from within. And here's the paradox. You were taught that obedience keeps the peace, but blind obedience creates the chaos. It builds corrupt systems. It silences truth-tellers. It keeps tyrants warm and whistleblowers cold. So, next time you feel that pull, that urge to nod, to blend in, to go along, ask yourself, is this peace or programming? Because real peace doesn't demand silence. It demands awareness. And that begins the moment you flip the switch. Off. Persona mask installation. At first, the mask was protection. You built it to survive, to belong, to be accepted. A little tweak here, a little silence there. Smile when you want to scream, agree when you want to protest, shrink when you want to expand. You told yourself it was temporary, just until it's safe, just until they understand you, just until the world stops hurting. But the world never did. And so, the mask stayed, and over time, it grew. It took on your voice, your posture, your laughter. It learned your rhythms and fears. It mimicked your soul so precisely that even you forgot it wasn't real. You began to identify with it. Call it me. Call it personality. Call it who I am now, but it was never you. It was armor that hardened into skin. And now, the mask smiles when you're hurting. It jokes when you're dying inside. It flirts when you're afraid. It nods in conversations that feel like suffocation. It performs happiness with such flawless precision that people think you're thriving. But inside, you're fading. This is the tragedy of the mask. It doesn't just hide your pain, it erases your access to it. You begin to forget what you feel, or worse, you begin to feel guilt for feeling. You invalidate your own depth just to maintain the illusion. You become a prisoner locked in a version of yourself you created to be loved. But that version isn't you. It's an echo. A costume stitched from expectations, fear, and repetition. And here's the darkest part. The longer you wear the mask, the more the real you atrophies. Your truth, your softness, your rage, your vulnerability, all of it starts to shrink. Not because it's gone, but because you stopped visiting it. You stopped giving it air. And now, it watches silently, from the shadows of your being, waiting for you to remember. To remember that the mask was never meant to be permanent. To remember that you are more than likability, more than performance, more than the version of you that pleases others. You were wild once, unfiltered, messy, whole. You cried too loudly. You laughed without apology. You spoke before you were sure. You didn't edit yourself for palatability. And yes, it got you hurt. It got you misunderstood. So you built the mask to protect that rawness, but protection became suppression. And now, you're in exile from your own soul, but it's not too late. The mask may be convincing, but it's not invincible. Sometimes it slips, when you're alone, when you're tired, when a song cracks you open, when someone touches a nerve too precisely. And for a moment, the real you surfaces. Don't push it away. That glimpse of pain, that awkward silence, that emotional tremor, that's not weakness. That's your real face. The one you forgot you had. The one that doesn't always smile, the one that aches, the one that remembers. And yes, the world may not know what to do with it, but your soul does. Your soul never asked you to be perfect. It asked you to be real. And realness is terrifying. It means showing up without guarantees. It means being seen in your unedited form. It means risking rejection, not to win approval, but to reclaim your selfhood. So, you have a choice. Keep performing the mask, or start peeling it back. Not all at once, not in public, maybe just in whispers, in journal entries, in safe spaces, in shaky conversations where you say, actually that hurt, or I don't agree, or I'm not okay today. And slowly the muscles of your true self will return. You'll feel awkward, exposed, but you'll also feel alive, because authenticity, unlike the mask, breathes. It moves, it stumbles, it evolves, and most importantly, it connects. Not through performance, but through presence, because the people who really matter don't need the mask. They need you, the messy you, the soft you, the angry, joyful, grieving, growing you. The mask kept you alive, but only the real you can truly live. Familiar pain loop. You say you want to heal, but then why do you keep going back? Why do you return to the same thoughts, the same patterns, the same wounds that never offered relief? Only repetition? You don't go back because it helps. You go back because it's familiar. Because deep down, predictable pain feels safer than uncertain peace. There's a comfort in the known, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. You know how it ends. You know the shape of it. You know how to brace for the impact. Healing, on the other hand, is terrifying. It asks you to step into unknown territory. It asks you to release identities you've built around your scars. It asks you to become someone you've never been before. And that's the real fear, isn't it? You're not afraid of pain. You're afraid of change. Because your pain has become a part of you, a landmark in your internal map. You've built routines around it, thoughts orbiting it, even relationships formed in the shadow of it. And letting go of that pain, it feels like erasing part of yourself, like losing a language only you can speak. You know how to hurt, but you don't know how to feel safe. So you loop, back to the memories that slice you open, back to the people who confirmed your worthlessness, back to the silence you mistake for peace. You say, I want to move on, but inside, a voice whispers, at least this pain is mine, at least I understand it, at least I know who I am inside it. And so you stay. You replay the betrayal, you rehearse the failure, you relive the moment they left, not to heal it, but to feel it again. Not because it's helpful, but because it's home. You've lived so long in emotional survival mode that actual healing feels alien. You crave something better, but recoil when it arrives. You sabotage joy because it doesn't feel earned. You push love away because it doesn't feel familiar. You look at the open door and then run back into the fire. Because fire is familiar, because silence is predictable, because numbness feels like control, but you're not weak. This isn't failure. This is how the mind protects itself. Predictable suffering is easier to manage than unpredictable peace. Pain becomes a coping mechanism, a guide, a companion. You tell yourself it's honesty, when really it's just repetition. You're not addicted to sadness. You're addicted to certainty. Because if you heal, really heal, you'll have to face a scarier truth. You are not who you were in your pain, and you don't know who you'll be without it. But that's where it begins. Real healing isn't calm at first. It's chaos. It's shedding skin. It's silence that screams. It's joy that feels foreign. It's love that feels undeserved. But slowly, the unfamiliar becomes familiar. Slowly you realize peace doesn't mean emptiness. It means possibility. You don't have to keep rehearsing your hurt. You don't have to live in the echo of old injuries. You don't have to carry pain just because it's yours. Yes, it shaped you, but it doesn't have to define you. Let it be a chapter, not the whole story. And when the old pain comes knocking, because it will, you don't have to invite it in. You can nod at it, acknowledge it, but you don't have to sit with it. You can choose something else, something new, something unknown. That's the only way forward. Not by waiting to stop being afraid, but by walking anyway. Even if your legs shake, even if your voice trembles, even if your whole being says, this doesn't feel safe, because healing doesn't feel safe at first. It feels unfamiliar, but so did pain, once. Pattern over meaning code. You think you seek truth, that you're drawn to meaning, that your mind wants to understand, but it doesn't. What your brain really wants is pattern. This is the theory of the pattern over meaning code, that your mind is wired not to recognize reality, but to invent stability, that it will choose a comfortable lie over a chaotic truth every single time, even if it means twisting logic, ignoring evidence, repeating stories that no longer fit, because your mind wasn't built for truth. It was built for survival, and survival depends on prediction. What happens next? Who can I trust? Where is danger hiding? The brain doesn't want the real answer. It wants the expected one. So, when reality gets unpredictable, when truths contradict, when chaos rises, your mind does something quietly terrifying. It makes things up. Not just stories. Patterns. Phantom logic. Rules that feel true because they're familiar, not because they're accurate. You've seen it in your own life. That person you keep trusting, even though they've hurt you. That belief you defend, even when the facts unravel. That illusion of control you cling to in a storm. These aren't rational decisions. They're emotional code, installed deep. Because uncertainty is scarier than being wrong. You'd rather be confidently mistaken than paralyzed by not knowing. This explains why people fall into conspiracy, into dogma, into nostalgia. The world stops making sense, so they create a map that does. Even if it's false, even if it leads nowhere. They trace the pattern, feel the comfort, and ignore the contradiction. But it goes deeper than belief. Your brain will literally hallucinate patterns to maintain narrative, optical illusions, false memories, time distortions. Because pattern isn't just thought, it's perception. You don't see what's there. You see what makes the chaos feel manageable. The mind smooths out the edges of the unbearable. It rounds trauma into story. It edits memory like a film, rearranging the frames to fit the rhythm of cause and effect. Not because it's dishonest, but because coherence feels like safety. You're not even aware it's happening. Because the pattern code operates beneath awareness, like an invisible hand moving the pieces, whispering, this fits, this makes sense, believe this. And when something doesn't fit, your brain ignores it. That's why people can believe in love and still accept abuse, believe in fairness and still justify cruelty. The contradiction isn't invisible, it's excluded, blocked. Not because they're evil, but because their mind would rather feel safe than feel true. And you're not immune. You've done it too. You've accepted patterns that weren't real because they protected you, because they gave your pain a reason, because they turned your chaos into a sequence, into meaning, even if that meaning was wrong. So what do? You start by asking, does this belief bring me peace because it's true or because it's predictable? Is this story I tell myself real? Or is it just easier than facing uncertainty? And then you sit with the uncertainty. That's the terrifying part. The moment when you let the contradictions stay visible, when you stop smoothing the jagged edges, when you let your mind ache with not knowing. Because that ache, that's the start of real awareness, not comfort, not pattern, but presence, a raw, terrifying honesty. And from that place, you don't need stories to feel safe. You don't need illusions to feel in control. You start seeing the world as it is, fractured, unresolved, unpredictable, and somehow still beautiful. So don't shame yourself for needing patterns. That's how your brain protects you. But don't be a prisoner to them either. You're not here to repeat loops. You're here to wake up from them. Achievement as worth script. You were born whole but taught otherwise. Taught that rest is a privilege, not a right. That love must be earned. That breath itself, just being, is not enough. And so, you learn to hustle, to prove, to climb, to run a race with no finish line, hoping that if you just achieve enough, build enough, win enough, maybe then you'll finally feel like you're allowed to exist. You've confused achievement with identity. You introduce yourself with titles, with roles, with trophies. You list your output like it's your soul. And when someone asks, "How are you?" you answer with your schedule, as if your worth is measured in exhaustion, as if being overwhelmed is a badge of honor. But who are you when you stop producing? Do you know? Or does the silence scare you? Because when you stop, the truth creeps in. You don't know how to be without doing. You don't know how to sit in a moment without trying to conquer it. Every stillness feels like guilt. Every pause feels like failure. And deep down, you're terrified that without your productivity, there's nothing left to admire. That's the lie. That your value is conditional, that love must be purchased with performance, that worth is granted only after you've proven pain. But where did that begin? Maybe it was childhood. The praise only came after the A+, the affection only came when you were good. Maybe it was a system that rewarded the obedient and punished the slow, or a family that didn't say, "I'm proud of you," unless you bled for it. Somewhere you learned that survival meant excellence, and excellence meant sacrifice, and sacrifice meant silence. So, you became what they wanted. You made yourself useful, reliable, impressive. You sharpened yourself into a tool and then forgot you were ever a person. Your needs became secondary. Your dreams were filtered through strategy. You became fluent in performance, allergic to rest. Even joy had to be earned. You couldn't just be happy, you had to deserve it. And now, even in your moments of success, you feel hollow. The applause fades fast. The goalposts move again. You hit the target, but the fulfillment never lands. Why? Because you're chasing wholeness through a system that profits off your emptiness. You've been programmed to monetize your existence, to tie your self-respect to your output, to turn your life into a resume. And every time you sit down to rest, that voice whispers, "Have you done enough today?" Not enough to be proud, enough to exist, to breathe, to deserve kindness. You are not lazy. You are tired. You are not selfish. You are starved. And you are not broken. You are just stuck in a machine that rewards burnout and calls it ambition. But here's the quiet truth. No one says loud enough. You don't have to earn your worth. You were born worthy. Before the grades, before the promotions, before the pressure, before the grind turned into identity, you were already enough. Just by breathing. Just by being. You're not a task list. You're not a job title. You're not a brand. You are a soul. A story. A body trying its best to hold it all together in a world that never stops asking for more. And you're allowed to stop. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to sit in a room and do nothing and still be worthy of love. You're allowed to put down the mask of achievement and still matter. You were never meant to live like this, where joy is a reward, where sleep must be justified, where love must be earned through labor. This isn't life. It's survival in disguise. So, what would happen if you stopped? If you walked away from the scoreboard? If you chose to see yourself through eyes that weren't measuring, comparing, calculating? You'd grieve. You'd unravel. You'd fall apart. But then, maybe you'd breathe again. Maybe you'd feel the earth beneath your feet and remember that you belong here, not because of what you produce, but because of who you are when everything else is quiet. Your heart beats not to power a machine. It beats because you're alive, and that alone is enough. Guilt-reward conditioning loop. You do something kind. You help someone. You give without expectation. You share your light. For a moment, it feels good, pure, like you did the right thing, like maybe you are a good person. And then, hours later, guilt creeps in. You doubt your motives. You criticize your words. You replay the moment, not with warmth, but with shame. You tell yourself it wasn't enough, that you could have done more, that it was selfish, that it was for attention. You punish yourself for being kind. Why? Because somewhere deep inside, your subconscious was wired to believe that joy must be paid for in pain. This is the guilt-reward conditioning loop, a hidden pattern so many live inside without realizing. You give, then suffer. You feel happy, then sabotage. You succeed, then shrink. And every time, it feels like balance. Not because it is balance, but because your nervous system was taught that you don't deserve good things without hurting first. Where did it start? Maybe childhood, maybe religion, maybe a household where love was transactional, where affection was earned, not given, where guilt was a teaching tool, where praise came with pressure, where joy always had a shadow. So your brain learned the equation. Good things equal sign future punishment. Love equal sign debt. Kindness equal sign guilt. Happiness equal sign danger. And even now, long after the original moment, your body remembers. The nervous system doesn't forget trauma just because your conscious mind does. So you repeat the loop over and over, unconsciously reinforcing it, because the pain after pleasure feels familiar, and familiar feels safe. So you sabotage yourself. You do something right, then convince yourself it was wrong. You celebrate, then numb out. You receive a compliment, then spiral for days. And no one sees it happening because it all takes place in silence. In the quiet corner of your mind where punishment dresses itself as self-reflection, where shame wears the mask of humility. But this isn't growth, it's conditioning. You're not being honest with yourself. You're reliving an old survival script, one that says, don't enjoy this too much, don't believe you're good, don't stay in the light too long, it will burn you. And that belief is a lie. But it's one that feels true, because the loop is tight. It rewards your self-doubt with a false sense of moral control. Look, your brain says, I caught myself being arrogant. I caught myself being fake. I caught myself enjoying something too much. Good job, now we're safe again. That safety is a prison. You don't need to punish yourself to be good. You don't need to feel guilty to be generous. You don't need to bleed to earn joy. But it takes awareness to break the loop. The next time you notice the cycle, pause. You do something kind, and then feel that guilt rising. Pause. Ask, who taught me that I'm not allowed to feel this? Who benefits from me staying small? Trace the feeling, not to the event, but to the origin. The first time you were told love must be earned. The first time joy was followed by pain. The first time being seen made you feel unsafe, because that's where the loop began. And only there can it be unlearned. It's not easy. Because guilt feels noble. Punishment feels responsible. But in reality, they're just familiar forms of control dressed up as virtue. True kindness requires no guilt. True joy needs no payment. You don't owe the world your suffering just because you felt light. So let yourself receive. Let yourself feel good, and stay there. Let the guilt come, but don't obey it. Watch it. Name it. Question it. Let it pass. Because you were not born to loop forever between giving and bleeding. You were born to feel whole, not broken, not punished, whole. And that begins the moment you realize you don't have to pay for your light with darkness. Not anymore. Ancestral fear encoding. You fear the dark, not just the absence of light, but the feeling of it, that strange primal silence that tightens your chest. You fear abandonment, not just loneliness, but the sense of being left behind, unprotected. You fear confrontation, not because you're weak, but because somewhere deep inside, your body still believes it could get you killed. But here's the truth that rarely gets spoken. These fears are not yours. You did not earn them. You did not choose them. They were encoded into you, passed down like sacred warnings, through blood, through breath, through generations of survival written into bone. This is ancestral fear. Fear that was born long before your name existed. Fear that protected your great-grandmother in the silence of a war-torn village. Fear that kept your ancestor quiet when the soldiers passed. Fear that taught them to stay small, to stay agreeable, to stay invisible. Because being seen once meant being hunted. And now, you inherit the lesson. Even if the war is over, even if the danger has passed, even if your world is safe, your nervous system doesn't know that. It's still watching the shadows, still scanning the crowd, still reacting as if every argument is a threat. Every silence is abandonment. Every uncertainty is death, dressed up in modern clothes. And this is not weakness. This is legacy. Your fear is not a flaw. It is an ancient intelligence. It is the reason you are here. Every heartbeat in your chest echoes the decisions of those who came before you, those who ducked, who hid, who obeyed, who survived. Their silence kept you alive. Their trauma is your inheritance. But here's the twist. What kept them alive might be what's keeping you small, because your blood remembers too much. It remembers the consequences of speaking too loudly, of stepping too far, of loving the wrong person, of dreaming the wrong dream. And so, every time you try to break free, something inside pulls back. A whisper, a tension, a better not. And you don't know where it comes from. It's not your story, but you feel it anyway. You stand on a stage and your throat tightens. Not because the audience is dangerous, but because 5 generations ago, a woman in your line was punished for being seen. You hesitate before setting boundaries. Not because you lack courage, but because your grandfather's survival depended on never challenging authority. You carry this code, and it fires in your body. This is more than psychology. This is biology. Science now confirms what ancient cultures always knew. Trauma travels through generations. It burrows into the genes. It changes how your brain processes stress, how your cells respond to fear. You are not just haunted metaphorically. You are wired with echoes. But that doesn't mean you're doomed, because awareness is how the cycle ends. The moment you recognize the fear as not yours, you loosen its grip. You begin to separate the now from the then. You learn to speak gently to the part of you that panics and say, I see you, but this isn't the same danger. You learn to ask, is this my fear or my grandmother's? Is this threat real or inherited? Is this freeze response from now or from a village burned long before I was born? You don't break the chain with force. You break it with presence, with noticing, with choosing again and again not to obey the ghosts of yesterday. You were never meant to carry all their pain. You were meant to witness it, to honor it, to thank it for keeping you alive, and then to release it, to breathe deeper, to speak louder, to walk into the darkness your ancestors couldn't. Not because they failed, but because they couldn't. You can. You are the edge of the blade, the final verse in a long and broken hymn, the moment in history where the pattern can change, but only if you stop mistaking the fear for truth. It feels real. It feels urgent. But that's the echo talking. And when you hear it, you have a choice. Repeat it or rewrite it. You are not just a person. You are a portal. And through you, entire lineages are either reactivated or healed. Reflection, avoidance, reflex. You say you're tired, overwhelmed, burned out. But is that the truth? Or is it camouflage? Because when things go quiet, you don't rest. You scroll, you binge, you start a new project. You turn the volume up, not down. You fill your time with noise, motion, stimulation, not because you need it, but because you can't stand what happens when it's gone, because in silence, the mirror appears. And the one thing the mind fears more than failure, more than loneliness, more than death, is a reflection it can't manipulate, a reflection it didn't prepare for, a version of you staring back with questions you don't want to answer. Who are you when no one's watching? When the notifications stop, the music fades, and the lights go dim, what surfaces? What feelings do you keep beneath the flood of activity? What truths have you buried beneath the schedule, the status, the sarcasm? There's a reason we crave distraction. It's not always about pleasure, it's about protection. Because real introspection is violent. It doesn't gently suggest, it exposes. It strips away your narratives. It dismantles your justifications. It demands honesty you may not be ready to give. And so, instead, you stay busy. You call it ambition. You call it productivity. You call it staying connected. But sometimes, it's just avoidance with better branding. Because silence is a spotlight. And in its glare, there's no script. No identity to hide behind. No audience to perform for. Just you, and the raw inventory of your unfinished business. So you scroll. Not because you care what strangers are doing, but because you hope to delay looking inward. You overbook your schedule not because you're needed, but because an empty evening means sitting with yourself. You talk nonstop, not to be heard, but to avoid the silence between sentences. Because in that silence, things surface. Regret, longing, shame, grief, all the ghosts you never invited, but never exercised. And you think ignoring them makes you stronger. That keeping the engine running means you're in control, but you're not driving, you're running. From the questions that wait in quiet rooms, from the emotional debris you never cleared, from the truth that maybe you don't know yourself as well as you pretend to. But here's the irony. The parts of you that feel unbearable, the ones you're hiding from, are the same parts asking to be seen. Not to shame you, but to free you. The sadness wants acknowledgement. The fear wants understanding. The guilt wants redemption. But they can't get it through another episode, another feed refresh, another weekend of artificial joy. They wait, patiently, until the noise dies down, until the mirror returns. And deep down, you know it. That's why the anxiety spikes in quiet rooms. Why you can't sleep without a screen. Why you feel the sudden urge to call someone when you're alone with your thoughts. It's the mind's reflex. Avoid the reflection. Avoid the confrontation. Because what if the version of you underneath the surface isn't who you've been pretending to be? But here's the truth you're circling around. Self-avoidance is not protection. It's delay. And every time you delay, the reflection grows heavier, the avoidance becomes chronic, and the person you're becoming slowly detaches from the person you truly are. And you start to feel hollow. You laugh, but it's not real. You achieve, but it doesn't land. You're surrounded, yet you feel alone. Because the deepest connection you're missing is with yourself. It's not easy to face, but it's necessary. You can't heal what you won't hold. You can't grow from what you keep hiding. You can't become whole until you're willing to sit in silence and listen, not just to your thoughts, but to the space beneath them, to the part of you that remembers everything you've suppressed. The part that's still waiting. So maybe the next time your thumb hovers over the screen or your calendar looks a little too full or your voice fills every pause, ask yourself why. Not as an attack, but as an invitation. What am I avoiding? What's trying to rise? Because the mirror will return sooner or later. And when it does, will you run again? Or will you finally look? Not to judge, not to perform, but to meet the person who's been there all along, waiting for silence. Herd compass override. You know what's true. You feel it in your gut. But you don't say it. You don't act on it. Instead, you glance sideways at the room, the street, the feed. You wait to see what they do. Then you follow. This is the theory of the herd compass override. That even when you know the truth, your internal compass flickers when you're surrounded. That you are wired to abandon reality when the tribe disagrees. And it's not weakness. It's design. For most of human history, being right didn't matter as much as belonging. The cost of standing alone wasn't just loneliness, it was death, exile. So, your brain evolved a brutal efficiency. Silence your instinct if it contradicts the herd. Trade truth for safety. Even now, in a world of individualism, the program still runs. The the override still triggers. You see it in meetings where no one speaks up, even when the plan is clearly wrong. You see it in classrooms, in crowds, in nations, entire populations nodding to falsehoods, not because they believe them, but because they believe everyone else does. And you feel the override kick in like a circuit breaker. You know the data. You know what's right. But your body betrays you. Your heart races, your breath shortens, your voice dims. You tell yourself it's not the right time, that someone else will say it first, that maybe you're not so sure after all, but you were sure. Until the herd arrived. Your internal compass, the thing you trust when you're alone, becomes unreliable when you're outnumbered. It starts spinning, glitching, not because it's broken, but because it's being overridden by a deeper code. Conformity equals survival. And the cost is subtle. You start living half-truths. You nod when you should speak. You laugh when you should walk away. You pretend not to notice, not to feel, not to know. Until one day, you forget what your compass even felt like. You wake up surrounded and wonder how you got there. This theory explains why civilizations repeat mistakes, why ideologies spiral unchecked, why entire generations inherit lies. Because once the herd moves, the override activates, not just in one person, but in millions. The truth dies not in battle, but in polite silence. And the terrifying part, it feels good. Belonging feels right. Validation feels like truth. Even when you're wrong, you feel safe. Even when the ship is sinking, you feel calm, because everyone else is still smiling. So, how do you break it? Not with certainty, but with stillness. You have to pause when the pressure rises. You have to listen for your original signal, the one beneath the noise, the one that doesn't flicker. It's there. It's always been there. But you buried it under compromise and consensus. You reclaim it by remembering one thing. Truth doesn't shout. It doesn't beg to be believed. It just waits. And when you finally hear it again, you'll feel something terrifying and beautiful. You are alone, but only at first. Because the moment you choose your compass over the crowd, something shifts. Others feel it. Someone else stands up. A voice cracks through the silence, not because you forced them, but because you made it possible. That's how you reverse the override, not by convincing the herd, but by becoming the person whose compass doesn't bend. So, next time your voice shakes, next time your instinct feels distant, don't ask, what will they think? Ask, what do I know? Then say it. Do it. Walk, even if your legs shake, because the herd is strong. But the truth is quiet, until someone gives it a mouth. Emotion suppression protocol. You were born knowing how to cry, how to tremble, how to scream when something hurts. That was your first language, raw, unfiltered expression. But over time, you learned a second one, a quieter one, a protocol, one designed to keep you safe by hiding the truth of what you feel. You learned not to cry in front of others, not to tremble when afraid, not to raise your voice unless it was composed, intelligent, justified. Emotion became something to manage, not something to feel. And so, you buried it, swallowed it, caged it inside your body, because somewhere along the way, the message arrived. Emotion is weakness, control is survival, and now, your body has become a vault. Every time you wanted to scream, but smiled instead. Every time you shook with grief, but said, I'm fine. Every time your throat tightened, but you forced the words out anyway. That's where it went. Not into the air, not into healing, but down, deep into the structure of your nervous system. The world praises you for it. They call you strong, resilient, calm, but they don't see the cost. They don't feel the pressure building in your chest. They don't see the fatigue behind your smile. They don't hear the silence that follows you home like a shadow. Because the more you suppress, the less alive you feel. You're no longer flowing. You're containing. But here's what no one told you. Emotions don't vanish. They wait. Unfelt grief becomes fatigue. Repressed anger becomes tension in your shoulders, ulcers in your gut, teeth grinding through the night. Joy denied becomes a flatness you can't explain. And the longer you hold it in, the more it leaks out in other ways. Sarcasm, cold detachment, disconnection from the people who once made you feel safe. And still, you push it down. Because if you let it out, if you really let it out, you're afraid it won't stop, that it will drown you, that you'll be judged, that you'll be labeled dramatic, unstable, broken. So you hold the scream in your stomach. You lock the tears behind your eyes. You breathe shallow, afraid that any deeper breath might carry everything up with it. This is not healing. This is self-erasure. The protocol you've adopted was built for survival in unsafe spaces. Childhood homes where no one listened, classrooms where tears were ridiculed, relationships where vulnerability was ammunition. You created emotional firewalls, but now the threat is gone, and the walls are still up, and you don't know how to turn them off. So you become the composed one, the rational one, the emotionally stable one. You carry everyone else's pain, but have no space for your own. You listen endlessly, but struggle to be heard. You say, it's not a big deal, even when it is. You downplay your wounds until you forget they were ever there. But your body remembers, your nervous system keeps score, and eventually, the dam breaks. Sometimes in illness, sometimes in panic, sometimes in a breakdown that feels like it came out of nowhere, but didn't. It was waiting, accumulating, pressing against the inside of your ribs, whispering, please feel me. Not to destroy you, but to release you. Because emotions are not enemies, they are messengers. Tears don't make you weak. They wash what words cannot. Rage doesn't make you violent. It points to your boundaries. Fear doesn't make you fragile. It shows where you long to feel safe. Sadness isn't dysfunction. It's love, reaching for what was lost. You weren't meant to be a fortress. You were meant to be a river, flowing, expressing, responding, and yes, sometimes flooding. But that flood clears what stagnation cannot. That flood heals. So here's the truth. The protocol is outdated. It protected you once, but now it is suffocating you. You don't have to erupt. You don't have to perform. But you do have to feel, quietly, loudly, alone or witnessed, bit by bit or all at once. Let it rise. Let it shake you. Let it soak into your skin and remind you, you are still human, still soft, still here. You are not cold. You are not numb. You are not broken. You are full, achingly full. And when you allow yourself to release, even a little, you begin to return. Not to the version of you that survived by suppression, but to the one still waiting beneath it all, the one who remembers how to feel. Self-image editor code. You think you know who you are. You have a story, a personality, a name that echoes in your head when you're alone. You remember your past, your victories, your scars, your favorite lies. You believe this version of yourself is real, but it isn't. Not fully. What you see, what you feel, is a curated version, edited, cropped, filtered through layers of memory, emotion, and ego. A highlight reel spliced together by something ancient and invisible inside you, the self-image editor code. This code lives deep in the subconscious. It runs silently, constantly rewriting the narrative of who you are and who you aren't. Not based on truth, but on comfort, on survival, on the fragile illusion that you are consistent, whole, and in control. But the truth? You're not the same person you were yesterday. You're not even the same person you were this morning. You are fluid, fractured, made of contradictions. But the editor doesn't like that. It wants a clean story, so it deletes the parts that don't fit. It buries the versions of you that make you question the script. That time you were cruel without reason? Buried. That time you were scared but smiled anyway? Rewritten. That impulse you had, the one that scared you? Erased. Also, you can say, this is who I am, with confidence, with pride, with peace. But it's not peace. It's programming. Your ego is the PR department of your identity. It spins, it reframes, it distracts. Because the truth of what you really are, the raw, glitchy, inconsistent mess, is too overwhelming, too destabilizing. So the code runs. Every memory you retrieve, it's reconstructed, not recalled, molded to fit your current self-image. You don't remember things as they happened. You remember them as your identity needs them to be. And when something breaks through, when a memory or thought threatens the illusion, the code kicks in harder. Denial, justification, distraction. Anything to avoid the one thing the ego fears most. Incoherence. Because incoherence feels like death. If you're not who you say you are, then who are you? If your self is just a collection of edited fragments, assembled to feel true, then what lies beneath the edits? You start to see the cracks. Why you sabotage relationships that reflect parts of you don't like. Why you reject compliments that don't fit your internal brand. Why you seek out situations that confirm your worst fears about yourself, just to keep the narrative intact. You're not living authentically. You're maintaining a myth, a comforting one, a polished one, but still, a myth. And the deeper tragedy? You don't even know what you've lost. You don't remember the parts that were edited out. You don't grieve the selves you buried, but they're still there, in the shadows of your psyche, in your dreams, in your triggers, in the moments you can't explain, when your behavior makes no sense, and your internal narrator goes silent. That silence? That's the ghost of a version of you that was never allowed to speak. But here's the thing. This isn't a flaw, it's a feature, the self-image editor. The harder code was designed to keep you sane, to keep you consistent, to make sure you can look in the mirror and recognize yourself. But survival isn't the same as truth, and comfort isn't the same as clarity. If you want truth, you have to invite the buried selves to the table. You have to look at the versions of you that were ugly or weak or lost and not flinch, not edit, not delete. You have to allow your self-image to fracture so it can evolve, because the real you is not a single entity. It's a chorus, a conflict, a cloud of possibilities collapsing into form moment by moment. And until you see that, you'll keep mistaking the mask for the mirror. So start asking, what am I not allowing myself to remember? What feelings do I instantly dismiss? What compliments feel like lies? And, most terrifying of all, what if I'm not who I think I am? That's not a crisis. That's the beginning. Because only when the editor steps aside, when the ego surrenders its grip, can the full, chaotic, brilliant self emerge. Not perfect, but real. Reciprocity, contract bias. You feel it, even when you shouldn't. The pressure, the pull, the invisible thread wrapped around your chest, whispering that you owe something. A favor, a reply, a return gesture. Even when you never agreed to anything. Even when the kindness was freely given. Even when it hurts to give back. This is the trap of reciprocity, a contract you never signed, but still obey. Because somewhere deep in your wiring, the code runs. If someone gives, you must give back. If they smile, you smile. If they sacrifice, you feel guilty. If they help you, even with no strings attached, a weight lands on your shoulders. And the longer it sits, the heavier it becomes. It's called the reciprocity bias, and it governs more of your life than you realize. Evolution wrote it into you. In the ancient wild, cooperation meant survival. We gave and received, not out of love, but out of necessity. Those who didn't return favors were left behind. Trust collapsed. Tribes crumbled, so we learned. Deep, unconscious, ancestral. That any act of kindness must be repaid. And now, it's a reflex. But in the modern world, it turns toxic. Because not every favor is clean, not every gesture is pure, and not every debt is real. People give with motives, they give with plans, they give with expectations written in invisible ink. And when they don't get what they feel they're owed, they weaponize it. Suddenly, you're ungrateful, selfish, difficult, so you give back. Not from love, but from guilt. You silence yourself to keep the peace. You say yes when everything in you screams no. You overextend. You burn out. You betray your own boundaries because somewhere in you is a voice saying you owe them. But here's the truth. Kindness does not create a contract. Generosity is not a transaction. Love is not a loan with interest. If someone gives with strings, it's not a gift, it's a trap. And if you return every act of care with self-sacrifice, you aren't kind. You're bleeding to feed someone else's entitlement. But it feels noble, doesn't it? To be the one who always gives, the one who doesn't keep score, the one who shows up no matter what it costs. It feels like strength, until it doesn't. Until your energy is gone, until your joy dries up, until you start to resent the very people you're trying to please. And then, you blame yourself for feeling that way, because the bias is that deep. It tells you that your value is in what you return, that your worth is tied to your usefulness, that the price of being loved is constant repayment. And that's the lie, because real love doesn't invoice you. Real kindness doesn't keep records. You are allowed to receive without returning. You are allowed to rest in someone's generosity without scrambling to earn it back. You are allowed to say thank you, and that be enough. You do not owe your soul for every smile. You do not owe your silence for every compliment. You do not owe your time, your energy, your body, your presence, just because someone gave you theirs. But if you've spent your life trapped in this bias, it will feel wrong to step away. It will feel selfish, cold, even cruel. But it's not. It's self-respect. It's clarity. It's the difference between real connection and quiet manipulation. So, the next time that feeling rises, that guilt-laced sense of debt, pause. Ask yourself, was there a contract or just an assumption? Or was this act of kindness pure or performative? Do I want to give back, or do I feel trapped? Because if your answer is the latter, then the kindest thing you can do is nothing. You are not cruel for protecting your energy. You are not broken for setting limits. You are not ungrateful for walking away from an offer that came with invisible chains. You are free to give when it's true. But not because you were programmed. Not because you're afraid. Not because guilt grabbed you by the throat and called it virtue. The code was meant to build tribes. Don't let it destroy you. Catastrophe, preparation, subroutine. Oh, you run through disaster scenarios in your head. You imagine the breakup before love begins, the crash before the flight takes off, the failure before the dream has a chance to breathe, and you tell yourself it's caution, wisdom, realism. But it's not. It's a subroutine, a mental reflex buried so deep it's running in the background of your every decision, not because danger is certain, but because preparing for pain feels safer than being caught off guard by it. This is the catastrophe preparation subroutine, and it's exhausting. You're not just living, you're rehearsing disaster. You're not just making plans, you're building emotional bunkers. You call it being responsible, being prepared, being smart. But truthfully, you're trying to reduce the shock, trying to pre-feel the pain so that if it comes, it won't destroy you. You think you're protecting yourself, but you're actually reliving a trauma that hasn't even happened. The brain doesn't know the difference. When you visualize disaster in vivid detail, your body reacts, your heartbeat changes, your muscles tense, stress hormones flood your system. And all this for something that might never arrive. For a hypothetical hell your mind has built in the name of control. But that's the thing, isn't it? It's not about the event. It's about control, because deep down, you don't fear the pain. You fear the powerlessness. You fear being blindsided. You fear surrendering to chaos. So you turn anticipation into armor. You prepare for catastrophe because it feels like doing something. But it's not protection, it's prediction addiction. And it comes at a cost. It steals your peace. It shrinks your capacity for joy. It turns every opportunity into a potential threat. You can't enjoy the good because you're scanning for the bad. You can't rest because your mind's busy building exit routes. You can't love without fear because you're already mourning the loss. It's a prison made of what-ifs. But here's the thing no one tells you. Imagining the worst doesn't make it hurt less when it happens. It just makes it hurt twice. First in your mind, then in real life, if it even happens at all. And most of the time, it doesn't. But you don't get those hours back. The nights spent spinning in fear. The mornings ruined by hypothetical grief. The conversations you avoided. The risks you never took. The joy you never allowed yourself to feel fully. Because some distant version of you might have to let it go. You think you're being strong, smart, safe. But you're really just exhausted. Because your nervous system was never designed to live on high alert forever. You're not a soldier in a war. You're a person trying to live. And somewhere along the way, you confuse vigilance with virtue. But safety isn't in preparation, it's in presence. And you don't have to unlearn your fear all at once. You don't have to become careless. But maybe you can start noticing the reflex. That quiet hum that says, what if it all goes wrong? And instead of answering it with disaster blueprints, you answer with breath, with pause, with truth. Because the truth is, not every good thing ends badly. Not every beginning is a setup for pain. Not every still moment is waiting to shatter. Sometimes peace is just peace. Joy is just joy. And love is just love. And even when things do fall apart, no amount of mental rehearsal makes it easier. What makes it easier is knowing you didn't waste your joy trying to predict pain, that you let yourself live before the loss, that you showed up fully, even while being afraid. Because courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the refusal to let fear script your life. So maybe the catastrophe preparation subroutine is part of your story. Maybe it kept you safe once, but now, maybe it's time to override it. Not with blind optimism, but with trust. Not in certainty, but in your ability to face whatever comes. When it actually comes, not before. Exit strategy, preload, you smiled, you stayed, you even said, "I love you," but you were already gone. Not physically, not yet, but emotionally, you had left the building long ago. Your mind had already rehearsed the goodbye, already imagined the fallout, already packed its emotional bags and moved into silence. You didn't wait for the ending. You preloaded it. This is the theory of exit strategy preload, that some people begin leaving long before anyone else notices, that the human mind, in its quiet brilliance, starts detaching early, not from malice, but as a form of protection. You felt it, the shift, the dimming. Conversations felt a bit colder. Moments that used to sting now just echoed. The emotional connection was still technically there, but it was hollow, safe, like watching your own life through glass, and no one around you saw it, because the performance stayed perfect. But inside, you were miles away. It's not cowardice, it's anticipation. Somewhere in you, the sensors picked up a signal, maybe subtle, maybe nothing concrete, but enough to trigger the preparation sequence. Your subconscious said, "This might not last, prepare." So you did. You stopped dreaming aloud, stopped imagining the future together. You stopped saying the deep things, not because you didn't feel them, but because you didn't want to feel them more. You began to emotionally budget, conserving affection, rationing vulnerability, delaying truth. Not because you wanted it to end, but because some part of you already knew it would. And that's what hurts the most. Not the goodbye, but the knowledge that your heart saw it coming and started letting go in silence. This preload strategy is a survival mechanism, a way to control impact. If the crash is inevitable, the mind tries to soften the fall. It distributes the pain in small doses, months in advance, so the final hit doesn't destroy you. But there's a cost, because while you're packing your emotional suitcase, the other person still believes you're home. They don't know you've already left the room in your mind. They still speak to the version of you that existed before the detachment, and by the time they feel the shift, it's too late. You've already said goodbye 100 times, in your head, in dreams, in quiet showers and long drives. So, when the real goodbye arrives, you don't fall apart. You go silent, because it's not new grief. It's old grief finally stepping into the light. This pattern doesn't just happen in romance. It happens in friendships, in jobs, in homes. You begin detaching quietly, rehearsing the ending, dimming the color so the fade doesn't sting. You withdraw piece by piece until what's left is polite, manageable, distant. And the world keeps calling it graceful. But the truth? It's grief. On layaway. So why do we do it? Because surprise is agony. Because shock is sharp. Because abandonment wounds. And so we abandon ourselves first. We vacate our own joy. Step away from our own depth. We start grieving before the goodbye, just so the moment won't devour us when it comes. But in protecting ourselves, we sacrifice something. Presence. We stop being real in our own lives. We trade authenticity for insulation. We stay physically close but emotionally armored. And even when there's a chance for repair, for honesty, for depth, we're already packed. We don't want to get hurt again. But the pain isn't always in the fall. Sometimes it's in all the moments we refuse to stay fully alive, just to avoid one inevitable end. So what's the alternative? It's terrifying, but simple. Stay. Feel it fully. Love without a parachute. Sit in the uncertainty. Risk the crash. And if the ending comes, let it hurt in real time. Not on a delay. Not pre-discounted. Let it break if it must. Because even in the wreckage, you were honest, present, real. You didn't leave early. You lived all the way to the end. Repeat until validated. You say it's a coincidence, that you keep finding the same kind of people, the same dynamic, the same ending. But deep down, you know it isn't chance. It's a loop, a pattern written into your nervous system, A cycle with one purpose, to find the original wound and finally make it right. You're not chasing love. You're chasing resolution, not connection, correction. You meet someone. They feel familiar. Not because they're safe, but because they echo a wound you already know. You feel the pull, the ache, the urgency to be seen, heard, held in the way you weren't when it mattered most. You don't choose them because they're good for you. You choose them because they match the shape of the original pain. And you think, this time it'll be different. This time they'll stay. This time they'll love you right. This time the story will end the way it should have. You bend, you mold, you perform, you hope. And for a while, it feels like maybe you were right, until it doesn't. Until the same silence returns, the same distance, the same sense that you're too much or not enough. And now the pain isn't just present, it's familiar. The same script, different actor. And yet again you wonder, why does this keep happening? But the question isn't why. The question is, what are you trying to fix? Because somewhere in your story, a part of you was made to believe that love was conditional, that your needs were too big, that safety had to be earned, that you weren't worthy of softness unless you proved your usefulness, that if you tried hard enough, stayed quiet enough, loved deeply enough, someone would finally love you back the way you needed all along. So you repeat. Not because you're broken, but because you're loyal to the fantasy of healing through reenactment. You think if you can get the pattern to end differently, the original pain will be erased, that you'll rewrite the past by perfecting the present. But the loop doesn't heal you. It keeps you hostage. Because the people you choose can't give you what was missing. That gap, the one left by the first betrayal, the first neglect, the first absence, can't be filled by mimicking the wound and hoping for a better outcome. You don't need a new version of the old pain. You need to stop letting pain define love. You don't need to be chosen by someone who reminds you of the one who didn't. You don't need to win over someone who echoes the parent who couldn't hold you. You don't need to perform for someone whose love feels just out of reach. That isn't healing. That's repetition with a prettier disguise. You've mistaken familiarity for destiny, but comfort isn't always safety. Sometimes it's just repetition wearing a mask. And if love feels like work, if connection feels like begging, if you always feel like you're one mistake away from abandonment, that's not love. That's your trauma, rehearsing the same lines, hoping the audience changes. You've done enough repeating. Now it's time to disrupt the pattern. And that begins with looking backward. Not to blame, but to understand. To meet the younger version of yourself who learned survival meant self-erasure. To hold the child who made herself small so others would stay. To tell them, you never had to earn love. You were always worthy of it. Because until you do that, your nervous system will keep dragging you into the same rooms, with the same energy, having the same conversations, bleeding from the same wounds. The names will change, the faces will change, but the ache will remain. Until you break the cycle. That doesn't mean you stop loving, it means you start loving differently. You stop chasing the unavailable. You stop mistaking anxiety for chemistry. You stop auditioning for affection. You stop letting your pain pick your people. And you begin to choose from your healed self, not your haunted one. It's not your fault that you learned love through loss, but it is your responsibility to unlearn the lie that says you must repeat it until someone else makes it better. They won't. Only you can. Not by finding the perfect person, but by becoming the version of you who no longer confuses pain with proof. You don't need to repeat the story. You need to write a new one where you are not waiting to be chosen, one where you choose yourself, completely, unapologetically, finally. Inner critic, firewall. There's a voice inside you, you know it well. It shows up when you're about to try, when you're about to step forward, speak up, show yourself. And it whispers, don't. You're not good enough. You'll embarrass yourself. You'll fail. It sounds cruel. It sounds cold. But beneath the surface, it's not trying to destroy you. It's trying to protect you. This is the inner critic firewall, a system your mind built to shield you from pain, from shame, from rejection. But instead of guarding your heart, it attacks it, because it believes that if it wounds you first, the world can't do worse. If it criticizes you before anyone else can, you'll be ready. If it shames you before others do, you won't feel the shock. If it lowers your expectations, you won't feel the fall. But in trying to protect you, it becomes the very thing it fears. It becomes the louder wound because after a while it doesn't wait for danger. It preemptively strikes. You look in the mirror and it mocks you. You make a mistake and it screams. You feel joy and it questions your right to it. This voice doesn't come from nowhere. It's built from moments. Maybe it was the parent who loved you, but only conditionally. The teacher who humiliated you for trying. The friend who laughed too hard when you failed. The memory of not being enough. The moment you were too much. You internalized their voices until they became your own. And now, you've made a habit of self-attack. Not because you hate yourself, but because you think it keeps you safe. But safety is a prison when it comes from fear, and the voice you trust to guard you is the one keeping you small. It doesn't just hurt you, it limits you. You don't apply for the job because it says you're underqualified. You don't tell them how you feel because it says you'll be laughed at. You don't chase the dream because it says you'll fail, loudly, publicly, permanently. So you sit, you shrink, you survive, and you call that wisdom. But it's not wisdom. It's wounding, dressed up as protection. And the longer it runs unchecked, the more you start to believe that the voice is you, that the critic is your conscience, that its warnings are truth, that it's just being realistic. But listen closely. That voice doesn't offer solutions. It offers shutdowns. It doesn't motivate. It paralyzes. It doesn't keep you from pain. It is the pain. So how do you fight something that lives inside you? You don't fight it. You understand it. You sit with it, not as your enemy, but as your wounded protector. You listen, not to obey, but to learn what it's afraid of. And then, you take the risk anyway, because the critic isn't brave. It never will be. It's a child version of you, frozen in a moment where pain meant danger, and the only defense was preemptive shame. You're not that child anymore. You can survive being judged. You can survive failure. You can survive being misunderstood. What you can't survive is a life lived entirely under the rule of a voice that's never known courage. So the next time it speaks, pause. Don't silence it. Don't argue with it. Just recognize it. Say, I hear you. I know you're trying to protect me, but I've got this now. And then step forward, even if your hands shake, even if your stomach turns, even if the voice is still screaming, because every time you act in defiance of it, you turn the volume down, not by force, but by truth. And eventually that voice becomes softer, less certain, less sacred. It doesn't disappear, but it stops running the show. And in the quiet it leaves behind, you find something else. A voice that encourages, that forgives, that allows you to try, fail, rise, repeat. Not because you're unbreakable, but because you're worth rebuilding. And that's not the critic speaking. That's you, the real you, finally being heard. Shame memory timestamp. Your mind is not a fair recorder. It doesn't document life like a neutral observer. It doesn't catalog your story evenly. It highlights the worst. It bookmarks the pain. It timestamps the shame. And it plays it back, on a loop. Every stumble, every awkward pause, every word you wish you hadn't said. It saves these moments in sharp, unrelenting detail, while the compliments, the victories, the gentle affirmations fade like background noise, forgotten. Because the mind doesn't archive praise, it archives humiliation. You remember the wrong laugh, the silence in a room that swallowed your voice, the teacher's disappointment, the text you never should have sent, the look on their face when you failed. These are etched into your timeline like scars in stone. Why? Because the brain was built for survival, not peace. Evolution favored those who remembered mistakes, those who replayed their social failures, their emotional wounds, their public collapses, those who learned through pain. So the mind developed a bias. It flags shame with red lights. It stores it in high definition. It attaches a date, a time, a scent, a heartbeat. So the moment you smell something familiar, or enter a similar room, or hear a voice just close enough, it plays again. The memory, the sting, the cringe. You're there, all over again. Your body reacting like it's now, but it's not. That shame isn't just remembered, it's relived, and the more it loops, the more it warps you. You begin to confuse the memory with identity. You forget that the event was a moment and start believing it defines you. You wear the mistake as a mirror. You become the echo of an embarrassment that should have died long ago. You say, "I'm awkward," but what you mean is, "I remember a time I felt humiliated and I never let it go." You say, "I'm not good with people," but what you mean is, "Once I reached out and was rejected, and now I flinch every time I try again." You say, "I'm not enough," but what you really mean is, "My brain recorded one moment of perceived failure and made it my blueprint." This is how identity bends. Not from the truth, but from repetition. Praise doesn't repeat like this. Kindness doesn't loop. It's soft. It fades. The compliment that lit you up for a second, it vanishes. But the shame sticks. It returns in quiet moments. It hijacks your silence. It rewrites your story in the language of regret. And the worst part? Most of those moments weren't even that big. You tripped over a sentence. You got the answer wrong. You were vulnerable, and it wasn't received. But to your nervous system, to your ancient, fear-wired brain, it was danger. Social rejection used to mean death, exile, isolation. And so, your body over-records the pain, just in case, just to be safe. But now, you're haunted by echoes that no one else remembers. The people who witnessed it, they moved on. The room where it happened, it changed. The world spun forward. But you stayed frozen, carrying the time-stamped shame like a hidden tattoo, avoiding certain places, certain people, certain parts of yourself. But what if it's time to break the loop? What if that moment doesn't define you? What if your mind was doing its job, protecting you? But now it's time to say thank you and let it go. You can't erase the memory, but you can rewrite the meaning. You can remind yourself, I am not that moment. I am not that mistake. I am not the awkward silence or the broken sentence. I am not the laugh that followed me out of the room. I am the one who survived it, who felt it fully and kept going, who woke up the next day, who chose to try again. And maybe that's the real miracle, not forgetting shame, but carrying it with dignity, not avoiding the loop, but refusing to believe it anymore. Because there's a truth underneath it all. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to grow. And sometimes, the sharpest growth comes from the memories that cut the deepest. But they are not who you are. You are not a timestamp. You are not a loop. You are not the ghost of your worst day. You are the story still unfolding. And every page after that one is yours to write. Survival over authenticity. No rule, you say you want to be yourself. But the moment you're in a room full of eyes, you shrink. You dull your edges, soften your voice, calculate your tone. You scan the room like prey, not a person. You laugh at jokes you don't find funny. You agree with opinions that scrape against your truth. You shrink, not because you're weak, but because your mind has been trained to survive first and be authentic second. It's not a flaw, it's evolution. Your ancestors didn't need to be honest. They needed to belong. In a tribe, being disliked could mean exile, and exile meant death. So, the nervous system learned a brutal lesson. Rejection is danger. Fitting in is safety. That wiring never left. It lives inside you, in your hesitation, in your overthinking, in your urge to become whatever the moment requires, just to stay connected. And that instinct is killing your authenticity, because it tells you being seen for who you really are is too risky. It tells you to perform, to adapt, to disappear behind a version of yourself that others will approve of. So, you put on masks, at work, at home, even alone, until you can't tell where the mask ends and you begin. But here's the thing. You're not faking it because you're insincere. You're faking it because you're scared. Because somewhere deep inside, your mind believes real you is unacceptable. That honesty equals isolation. That truth equals conflict. That being fully, unapologetically you will cost you the love, the safety, the connection you've spent your whole life chasing. So, you trade authenticity for belonging. Not real belonging, but the illusion of it. Surface-level connection that never touches the soul. Approval without intimacy. Proximity without presence. And then you wonder why you feel lonely even in crowded rooms. Why your friendships feel thin. Why your own voice sounds foreign in your head. Because you've been hiding. Because survival told you to. And because no one taught you that being real is not death. It's freedom. You don't have to abandon caution. You don't have to scream your truth into every space. But maybe you can start small, with one honest word, one unfiltered thought, one moment where you stay in your skin, even when it trembles, because the only way to feel truly connected is to be truly seen. And you can't be seen if you're always performing. Authenticity isn't loud. It's not theatrical. It's honest. It's that moment you admit what you really think, what you really feel, what you really want, even when your voice shakes, especially when it shakes, because that's how you rewire the fear. That's how you teach your nervous system that honesty is an exile. It's return. Return to self. Return to truth. Return to the version of you that existed before the shrinking, before the performance, before the world taught you that blending in was safer than standing up. Because yes, being real carries risk. You will be misunderstood. You will be judged. You will lose people who only loved the version of you that made them comfortable. But what you gain is you. And the people who can love you as you are, not as you pretend to be. And that kind of connection, that's not survival. That's liberation. So, the next time you feel yourself shrinking, stop. Breathe. Notice the instinct. Name it for what it is. A survival reflex, not a truth. And then ask, who am I when I stop performing? Who am I when I let myself be? That's where life starts, not with fitting in, but with finally showing up. Checklist, identity script. You wake up and remember who you are by checking boxes. Job? Check. Relationship? Check. Education, appearance, income, reputation? Check, 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 and check. You breathe easier when the list is complete, because without it, you're not sure what's left. This is the theory of the checklist identity script, that you've been trained to define yourself by external markers, to tether your existence to achievements, aesthetics, roles, not because you're shallow, but because the world taught you that being someone means being legible, knowable, measurable, bullet-pointed, so you built the list. You became dependable, presentable, desirable, the kind of person others can understand in 30 seconds or less. But beneath the list, beneath the neat columns of roles and labels, something else began to dissolve. Your deeper self, the wild part, the contradictory part, the one that doesn't fit on a resume or dating profile, the self that doesn't translate easily into language. The real you, untidy, ever-changing, uncertain, got quieter each year, buried under checkboxes, and you didn't even notice it slipping away. Because the world praised the list. You were doing it right, hitting your milestones, living on track. People smiled at you like you had it all figured out. You smiled back, wondering why it still felt like a role you were rehearsing. Because it was. You weren't becoming yourself. You were becoming a summary of yourself. You knew how to answer the question, what do you do? But you forgot how to answer, what do you need? You could describe your goals, but not your grief. You could talk about plans, but not why they mattered. And when the checklist shifted, when you lost the job, or the relationship ended, or your body changed, you felt lost, because the markers were gone. And without them, who were you? The truth is, most of us are running scripts we didn't write. We inherit them from parents, cultures, timelines. We follow blueprints handed to us by people who were just trying to survive. Be good. Be successful. Be desirable. Be strong. Be quiet. Be likable. But nowhere in that list was, be true. The deeper self doesn't speak in bullet points. It whispers in feelings, in contradictions, in longings you don't know how to name. And the more you cling to your checklist, the more distant that voice becomes. But one day, the checklist stops working. You hit the goals, you get the titles. You become the person you were told to be. And instead of feeling whole, you feel hollow. Because the script doesn't know what to do once it runs out of tasks. You realize you've mastered being seen, but forgotten how to see yourself. And that's where the shift begins. You start asking questions the checklist never taught you how to answer. Who am I when no one's looking? What do I believe in when no one's validating me? What would I create if I stopped performing? You start noticing the self beneath the script, the one who breaks the rhythm, the one who says, I don't want this title anymore, the one who finds beauty in stillness instead of speed, the one who knows there's something real under the perfect form and is finally ready to feel it. It won't happen all at once. You've spent years being legible. Unlearning that will be slow. Some days you'll miss the checklist, miss the certainty, the neatness, the applause. But slowly the deeper self will return, not to destroy your life, but to restore your soul. And when it does, you'll start writing a new script, one with no bullet points, one with breath, with space, with truth. And that's when you'll stop being a summary and start being whole. Control, illusion, maintenance. You tell yourself you're just being organized, efficient, responsible. You plan your day down to the hour. You check every message twice. You clean when you're anxious. You fix other people's problems before they ask. But beneath the polish, beneath the routines, beneath the lists and systems and smiles, there's something else, a pulse of panic. Because none of this is really about thriving. It's about containing the chaos. You micromanage not because you trust yourself, but because you don't trust life. Every task, every rule, every ritual is a wall against the unknown. You grip the steering wheel of your day like it's the only thing keeping you from drifting into the dark. You control your surroundings, your relationships, even your thoughts, because the alternative, the raw uncertainty of not knowing, is unbearable. And so, you build order like armor. You clean to feel safe. You overanalyze to feel ready. You rehearse conversations in your head because spontaneity feels like danger. You control people with kindness, always helpful, always available, because if they need you, maybe they won't leave. This isn't peace, this is strategy. Your life becomes a maze of invisible rules. You tell yourself you have to do certain things, or else. Or else what? You don't even know. Just something bad, something collapsing. The fear isn't always clear, but it's constant. So you manage, you maintain, you stay one step ahead, and you call that living. But it's not. It's survival in disguise. Control gives the illusion of safety. It tells you, if you can just plan enough, perfect enough, prepare enough, nothing will hurt you. But pain doesn't care about your spreadsheets. Grief doesn't respect your calendar. Life crashes in anyway. And when it does, it leaves you not only broken, but shocked. Because you thought you were safe. That's the trap. The mind would rather cling to fake control than face real uncertainty. You'd rather believe you're steering than admit no one is, because surrender feels like death. Chaos feels like drowning. So, you keep building routines like lifeboats, and when they start to sink, you blame yourself for not paddling hard enough. But the truth is, you were never supposed to paddle this much. You were supposed to float. You were supposed to trust. Not blindly, not recklessly, but deeply. Trust that not everything can be known, that not everything needs a plan, that control isn't the same as care. And sometimes, loosening your grip is how you start to breathe again. But first, you have to confront the part of you that needs control, the part that was born in a storm, the part that saw too much chaos too young, the part that decided, if I can predict everything, I'll finally feel safe. That part deserves compassion. It didn't make a mistake, it made a shield. But the war is over. You don't have to manage every detail to deserve rest. You don't have to fix everyone's mood to feel worthy. You don't have to control every outcome to call yourself strong. Strength is in the release. The question isn't, how do I control more? The question is, what am I so afraid would happen if I didn't? Would people leave? Would everything fall apart? Would you? Let the silence answer. Let the mess arrive. Let the unknown speak. Because somewhere in that chaos is the truth you've been avoiding. You're allowed to not know. You're allowed to not plan. You're allowed to just exist, unoptimized, imperfect, alive. Control is not the cure, it's the coping. And once you see that clearly, you can start to build something more honest. Not a life where everything is managed, but a life where you can finally breathe without managing it all. Pack light emotion mode. You pride yourself on being strong. You don't ask for much. You don't lean on others. You carry your own weight, your own wounds, your own silence. You tell yourself it's independence. that needing less makes you free. But the truth? This didn't start as strength. It started as escape. You trained yourself to pack light in the emotional world, not because you wanted to, but because somewhere along the way, your needs were too heavy for someone else to carry. You reached for comfort and got silence. You showed vulnerability and got shame. You asked for love and got conditions. And so, little by little, you started unpacking. Love, too unpredictable. Support, too inconsistent. Comfort, too risky. So you learned to survive on less. To need less, to want less. You stopped expressing, you stopped expecting, you stopped reaching. Not because you don't feel, but because you felt too much, and it nearly broke you. Now you wear your independence like armor. You say, I'm fine when you're unraveling. You say, I don't need anyone when you're starving for connection. You smile during collapse. You apologize when someone else hurts you, because deep down, the thought of being a burden terrifies you. You've mistaken your ability to survive without help for a badge of honor, when really, it's a scar. Pack light, emotion mode isn't freedom. It's emotional evacuation. It's the shrinking of your needs to fit the space others were unwilling or unable to hold. It's the internal deal you made with yourself. If I stop needing love, I'll stop being disappointed. And it works, for a while. You become hyper-capable, efficient, the one others rely on. You become a fortress. But inside that fortress, you're alone. And loneliness doesn't care how competent you are. The price of needing nothing is feeling nothing fully. Joy becomes muted. Grief becomes mechanical. Love becomes filtered. You become so good at doing it all yourself, you forget what it felt like to be held, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, completely. You begin to fear softness, fear dependence, not because those things are weak, but because they threaten the illusion you've built, that you're okay without them. But here's the quiet truth. You're not meant to pack light. You're meant to be held, not just admired. You're meant to be understood, not just tolerated. You're meant to have needs and to be met in them. There's no shame in needing help. There's no weakness in craving comfort. And asking for love doesn't make you a burden. It makes you human. The world taught you to pack light because it was never taught to carry people well. But that doesn't mean your needs are too much. It means the world is still learning. And maybe so are you. So start unpacking, slowly. Ask for something small. Let someone in. Let them see the parts of you you've edited out of the story. The soft parts, the scared parts, the parts that we're told, don't ask for too much or you'll lose everything. Because asking is risk, but never asking is a slow form of disappearance. You don't have to abandon your strength, but you can let go of the lie that needing nothing makes you whole. You were never meant to survive alone. You were meant to be met. And the first step is letting someone try. Politeness as self-erasure. You say sorry before speaking. You shrink when entering a room. You wait for everyone else to finish before daring to share your thoughts. You nod when you disagree. You smile when you're uncomfortable. You laugh at jokes that slice through you, and you call this kindness. But what if it's not kindness? What if it's erasure? We're taught that politeness is virtue, that being like it is safety, that softness is strength. But the version of politeness you learned wasn't mutual respect. It was self-deletion. You were trained to be agreeable at any cost, to be palatable, to disappear just enough that you don't threaten, don't offend, don't exist too loudly. And now your nervous system rewards you for vanishing. Each time you ignore your truth to preserve someone else's comfort, your brain tells you, good, safe, approved. You get a hit of dopamine for betraying yourself, for saying it's okay when it wasn't, for saying no worries when it absolutely was a worry, for stepping aside, even when the space belonged to you. You think you're being nice, but deep down you know what you're really doing is surviving. Because once speaking up had a cost. Once being real got you hurt, got you rejected, got you punished. So your mind learned the algorithm. Be small, stay safe. Be quiet, stay loved. Be pleasing, stay included. Now you can't stop. You overthink texts. You rehearse conversations. You replay interactions for hours just to check if your honesty made someone uncomfortable. You apologize for having needs. You feel guilty for setting boundaries. You lower your volume, your wants, your instincts, until your life fits inside other people's expectations. But here's the quiet tragedy. The more nice you become, the less of you remains. Politeness becomes a costume, and eventually it fits so well you forget there's a real person underneath it. You lose access to your anger, your grief, your desire. You stop asking, "What do I want?" and only ask, "What would make them comfortable?" You become easy to like and impossible to truly know, and people do like you. They like the version of you who never says no, who never pushes back, who always agrees. But when you're alone, that version feels like a lie, because it is. It's not your fault. You were trained into this, conditioned by culture, by trauma, by caretakers who rewarded obedience but never curiosity. You didn't choose this mask. You built it to survive. But now, the mask is suffocating. Because the parts of you that were silenced, they never died. They just waited. Waited for the day you'd stop apologizing and start existing. Waited for the day you'd say, "No, actually, I don't agree." Waited for the day you'd walk into the room and not shrink. And maybe that day is today. Because here's the truth. Kindness doesn't require silence. Compassion doesn't demand invisibility. Being good does not mean being erased. You can be honest and gentle. You can be direct and warm. You can take up space without apology. You can speak without softening every sentence. You can say no without guilt. You can disagree without shame. You don't have to earn your existence by minimizing it. And yes, it will feel terrifying at first. Because the world taught you that your worth is tied to your agreeableness, that taking care of others means abandoning yourself, that being polite is more important than being whole. But those are myths, and you're allowed to break them. You're allowed to ask for what you want, to correct someone, to take the last seat, to say, "That hurt me," to speak your truth even if your voice shakes, even if your hands tremble, even if they don't like it, because you are not here to be digested. You are not here to be decor. You are not here to be liked more than you are known. You are here to be real. So stop apologizing for existing. Stop shrinking to survive. Stop calling your silence grace. Start calling it what it is: a learned strategy, a ghost costume, a cage made of manners. And then, slowly, step out. Breathe. Speak. Take space. Not because you need to be loud, but because you were never meant to disappear. Flaw hyperfocus mechanism. You don't see the whole picture. You think you do. But what you're really seeing is distortion. Your brain doesn't show you your life like a photograph. It acts more like a spotlight, zooming in, cropping, exaggerating. And the parts it chooses to highlight, they're almost always the flaws. The wrinkle, not the smile. The one harsh word, not the kindness before it. The missed opportunity, not the 100 steps it took to get there. You zoom in on the imperfection and everything else fades. This is the flaw hyperfocus mechanism. A silent, relentless filter in your mind. You don't ask for it. You don't control it. But it runs again and again until flaws become your landmarks and everything else becomes noise. You can have 10 people praise you and 1 criticize you. Guess which one your brain replays at night? You can reach 10 goals and stumble once. Guess which one your memory traps in slow motion? It's not because you're broken. It's because your brain was built for threat detection. Evolution didn't care if you saw beauty. It cared if you noticed danger. And somehow, over time, being imperfect started to feel dangerous. So now your brain scans for flaws not to punish you, but to protect you. It zooms in so you can fix it, avoid it, never be hurt again. But protection can become a prison. When your self-image becomes a collection of everything wrong, nothing feels right, even when it is. It's not just about appearance. It's your identity, your worth, your past. You remember that awkward moment from years ago and still wince. But you forget the thousands of graceful, kind, brilliant things you've done since. You remember the failure, the one rejection, the silence after you opened up. And those become the chapters you reread, as if they define the entire book. They don't. You are not your worst moment. You are not the detail your brain obsesses over. You are not the blemish it won't let go of. But when you only focus on the cracks, the whole sculpture seems broken. Even your own reflection becomes an enemy. You don't look to see yourself. You look to spot the flaw, a performance review, a threat scan. You zoom in so tight, you forget the light in your eyes, the strength in your posture, the story in your skin. And what about the beauty? What about the time someone said your presence made them feel safe? What about the moment your laughter softened a room? What about the goals you reached without applause? What about the dreams you still hold quietly at night? They happen too, but your brain doesn't replay them because they're not threats, because they don't demand correction. And so, your own success becomes invisible, your own beauty, blurred. But you can challenge the spotlight, you can widen the frame. It starts small. When your brain fixates on a flaw, ask, is this the whole story? What am I not seeing? Name the beauty. Name the progress. Name the effort. Not to lie to yourself, but to balance the lens. You don't have to pretend flaws don't exist, but you don't have to make them the map. Because a wrinkle doesn't erase your radiance. A failure doesn't delete your strength. A rejection doesn't make you unlovable. You've spent years staring through a microscope. Maybe now it's time to step back and see the whole masterpiece. Because you are not the flaw. You are the frame that holds it all. Worth delay programming. You've been told your whole life. Keep going. Just a little more. The next step, the next level. One more achievement and you'll feel it. The peace, the pride, the permission to finally rest. But it never arrives. Because this is worth delay programming. A system so embedded in you that even your victories feel like temporary breathers before the race resumes. You get the thing. And instead of peace, you get a new finish line. It moves every time. You remember when getting into school felt like everything. You got in, then it was grades, then it was the job, then it was the promotion, the apartment, the city, the partner, the recognition, and with every success, the reward glimmered, just out of reach, just ahead. That's the trap. You've been wired not to feel worthy, but to pursue worth. You were programmed to delay joy, to treat the present as a corridor, never a destination. You were taught to associate success with a future version of yourself, a better version, a more acceptable one. So, you keep running. Because resting too long feels like failure. Because stopping feels like fading. Because if you're not chasing something, who are you? The system doesn't tell you when to stop. It just hands you another goal, another metric, another milestone dressed as meaning, and you thank it. You grind harder. You sacrifice more. You believe this one will be it. But it isn't, because the system was never built to complete you. It was built to keep you compliant, to turn your sense of self into a moving target, to train you to believe that worth must be earned over and over again. And it works. Even when you rebel, quit the job, escape the loop, you build a new checklist, softer goals, healing goals. You say, when I'm finally centered, when I've fixed myself, when I've let go. But it's still the same chase, still the same structure, worth, just ahead, never here, never now. And the cost is enormous. You stop feeling the joy of becoming because you're obsessed with arriving. You lose your present to your future. You forget what it feels like to just exist without proving anything. Because even your rest feels like an investment. Even your self-care has a result attached. You treat your emotions like progress, your downtime like a prelude to better performance, and the system keeps winning because it doesn't need you to suffer, it just needs you to strive. It needs you to never feel done. And so, you're always almost okay, almost enough, almost whole, but never quite. So what happens when you stop? When you choose just once not to chase, not to grow, not to climb, not to become? At first, panic, withdrawal. The silence screams. The stillness feels like failure. But if you stay in it long enough, something starts to rise. Not excitement, not dopamine, something quieter. Acceptance. A realization that you're not the unfinished product of your goals. You're not the bullet points waiting to be checked. You are you, here, now, with or without the next thing. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not lacking. You're just in a world that taught you to measure your soul by milestones. And now you're unlearning that language. That takes time. That takes pain. But it also brings freedom, because when you stop treating your life like a staircase, you start seeing the rooms around you, the light, the breath, the people you forgot to notice while looking ahead, and for the first time, you feel here. So, the next time you hit a goal and still feel empty, don't blame yourself. blame the program, then rewrite it. Fixer identity install. You say you're just helping, that you care, that you're the one people come to when everything falls apart. And maybe that's true. But what if it's also your escape? You've made yourself the fixer, the solver, the strong one, the steady voice in the middle of other people's chaos. You're the one who listens when no one else does. The one who makes plans when everything collapses. You hold it all together, not because it's your job, but because it's become your identity. You fix others so you don't have to fix yourself. Because as long as someone near you is broken, you never have to look at the cracks in your own code. You pour yourself into their pain, their needs, their healing. You make their problems yours, not out of malice, not even out of control, but because deep down, it feels safer to focus outward than inward. Safer to clean someone else's mess than sit with your own silence. The pain you carry, buried, half-named, long ignored, waits behind every quiet moment. So you keep moving, keep fixing, keep offering advice you don't apply to yourself. And the world thanks you. They call you wise, selfless, empathic. But they don't see the truth underneath. The fixer is also the one most afraid to be seen. Because being seen means being known. And being known means being vulnerable. And that's the one thing the fixer never learned how to do. You've been the emotional scaffolding for others for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to collapse, to fall apart and let someone hold you. You've built your worth on usefulness, your safety on control. You offer compassion like currency, hoping one day it'll be returned. But deep down, you don't expect it to be. Because the fixer doesn't just solve problems, they hide in them. Every broken person you try to rescue, every dysfunctional relationship you stay in, every lost soul you pour into, it gives you purpose. And as long as you're necessary, maybe you won't feel disposable. As long as they need fixing, maybe you won't have to feel your own emptiness. But here's the cost. You lose yourself in the process. Your boundaries vanish. Your energy drains. Your identity becomes a mirror of their crisis. You forget what it means to exist without rescuing someone, to rest without guilt, to love without obligation. You become so fluent in their pain that your own becomes foreign. And here's the truth that stings. Sometimes you're not helping. You're enabling. Sometimes your fixing is a distraction. For you, not just for them. And while you stitch up their wounds, yours go untreated. In fact, they grow, quietly, invisibly, until one day you realize no one's coming to fix you. No one knows how, because you've never let them see that you're broken too. You taught them to see you as strong. You taught them to lean on you. But who do you lean on? Who knows the weight you carry when the door is closed, when the lights are off, when the performance ends? Maybe it's time to uninstall the fixer identity, not because care is wrong, but because you deserve care too. Because you are more than what you do for others, more than your emotional labor, more than your ability to solve. There is a you beneath the fixer, a version that's scared, tired, raw, real, and that version doesn't need to be useful. It just needs to be held. But that kind of healing won't come from solving others. It will come from turning inward, from asking, why do I believe I must earn love through labor? Why do I only feel valuable when I'm needed? Who told me that being whole means being silent about my pain? Because you are in pain. You've just masked it in service. And service that masks suffering isn't virtue. It's avoidance. So, what if you stopped? What if you let them fix themselves? What if you gave the same grace to your own unraveling? You don't have to be everything for everyone. You don't have to hold their world to prove your worth. You don't have to fix them to avoid the work of healing you. You're not broken, just buried. And the first step to becoming whole again is stepping out of the role you were never meant to carry alone. Emotional compartment, coding. You feel things, but only in pieces. Work stress goes in the professional box. Grief goes in the deal with later drawer. Love gets filtered through caution. Rage is tucked under humor. Vulnerability, hidden in politeness. It all seems organized, functional, clean. But what you've really built is a fortress of emotional compartments, each one locked, labeled, silently screaming. This is emotional compartment coding, a survival strategy disguised as emotional maturity. You didn't choose it consciously. It formed slowly, over years, piece by piece, pain by pain. You learned early that some feelings weren't welcome, that some reactions were too much, that certain truths had to be swallowed, not spoken. So you started sorting. This belongs here. That doesn't belong anywhere. This is fine in public. That must stay private. These are safe to feel around others. But these can only exist in the dark, alone. And it worked. You became efficient, respected, composed, the one who handles things, the one who doesn't fall apart, the one who smiles while bleeding quietly. But something else happened too. You stopped flowing. Because emotions aren't meant to be stored. They're meant to move. Like water, like breath, like truth. And when they're boxed up, boxed in, boxed away, the soul doesn't grow stronger. It stiffens. Like dried clay, left too long untouched, you start to feel it. That numbness in your chest when you should feel joy. That delay between heartbreak and tears. That awkward distance between your face and your actual feelings. You laugh, but it's not real. You cry, but it's delayed. You speak, but it's filtered. You're not cold, you're sealed. And sealing came from necessity. Maybe your environment didn't have room for your grief. Maybe your love was too intense for those who received it. Maybe your anger was punished. Maybe your softness was misunderstood. So, you learned the only way to stay acceptable was to split yourself, to present just the parts that wouldn't scare, shame, or burden others. You compartmentalized not to deceive others, but to survive them. And now, you can't even find the lock sometimes. You try to access sadness, and it's gone. You want to love fully, and you freeze. You need to break, but you laugh instead. You're trying to feel, but all you find is silence. And the worst part? You don't even realize how much you've lost. Because the code runs deep. You walk into a room and your mind instantly checks. Is this a place where anger is allowed? No. Suppress it. Is this a space for grief? No. Hold it. Is love safe here? Unsure? Withdraw it. Decision made, emotion coded, box sealed. Move on. But you're not a filing cabinet. You're not a spreadsheet of reactions. You are a river. You were meant to feel all of it and let it pass through, not store it until you can't remember why you hurt. So what happens when we keep sealing the boxes? We forget how to open them. We lose fluency in our own emotional language. We stop trusting our instincts. We begin to fear our feelings, not because they're wrong, but because they're unfamiliar. But it's not too late. Clay hardens, but it can be softened, rehydrated, shaped again. And so can you. It begins by noticing. When you catch yourself laughing instead of crying, pause. When you feel numb during joy, ask why. When you sense a deep truth rising, but your instinct is to suppress it, stay. Let it rise. Let it hurt. Let it flood. That's the code starting to break. You won't die from feeling. You'll return from it. Bit by bit, emotion by emotion, the compartments will begin to open. Not all at once, but enough to let light in, enough to let air flow, enough to remember that being alive isn't about control, it's about capacity. And you have more than you think. So let the grief spill. Let the joy overflow. Let the anger sharpen. Let the love knock down doors. It's messy. It's inconvenient. But it's you. The whole, wild, beautiful, unboxed version of you. And that version doesn't fit in compartments. It never did. External validation. Ping. You post something, a thought, a photo, a tiny fragment of yourself, and then you wait. The phone stays close, the app stays open. You refresh, you scroll, you check the time, and deep down, you're not just hoping for likes or comments or hearts. You're waiting for confirmation. Confirmation that you still exist. This is the external validation ping. It's not vanity. It's not desperation. It's far older than that. It's the ancient ache of the human mind asking one terrifying question. Am I real if no one sees me? You've felt it. That flicker of unease when no one replies. That microscopic panic when a message is left on read. That strange emptiness when a post disappears into silence. It's not just disappointment, it's disorientation. Because in that silence, the reflection vanishes. And without reflection, identity flickers. You see, the mind was built in mirrors. Not glass, but people. Their reactions, their eyes, their voices saying, I see you, you're here, you matter. From the moment we're born, we learn who we are by watching others respond to us. Cry, and someone comes. Smile, and someone smiles back. But now, the mirrors are screens, and instead of eye contact, we get metrics. Instead of presence, we get push notifications. Instead of connection, we get pings. Each like, each comment, each share, it's a tiny digital echo saying, you still exist, you still register, you still matter to someone. But the high is temporary. It always fades. The ping wears off faster every time. And so, you scroll again. You post again. You check again. Not for fame, not for attention, but for reassurance. The same way a child reaches for a parent's hand in the dark. This isn't weakness. This is wiring. The mind craves feedback. It wants to know where it stands in the tribe, in the network, in the algorithm. It whispers, am I still safe? Am I still included? Am I still real in their eyes? And the screen replies with numbers. But numbers don't care. They rise, they fall, they vanish. One viral post, then silence. One moment of affirmation, then hours of doubt. And the cycle begins again. You start optimizing yourself for the ping. You say what will land. You share what will be liked. You sand down your edges, delay your thoughts, blur your truth, just to trigger that next validation hit. Until slowly, without noticing, your digital self becomes a performance, and your real self becomes unclear. You start to question, who am I when no one's watching? What do I believe when it won't be retweeted? What part of me exists if it doesn't live in someone else's feed? This is the danger of reflection without depth. We stare into 1,000 mirrors and forget which one is real. We confuse exposure with connection. We confuse reaction with recognition. We confuse feedback with love. But here's the deeper truth. The validation you're searching for, it can't come from the outside. Because if someone else has to see you for you to believe you exist, then your identity is never yours. It's a rental, a mask, a shadow. You are real, even in silence. You are real, even when no one replies. You are real, even when the post gets 0 likes. You exist in the moments no one captures. You exist when you're off the screen, off the grid, out of the algorithm. You exist in quiet, in breath, in thought. But it will feel hollow at first, because your brain has been trained to wait for the ping, to rely on it, to anchor to it like a heartbeat. And letting go of that noise will feel like death. But it's not death. It's detox. It's remembering. It's reclaiming your sense of self from the glitchy feedback loops of modern life. So, the next time you reach for the scroll, the post, the ping, pause. Ask yourself, am I expressing or checking? Am I sharing or seeking permission to exist? And if it's the latter, wait. Wait until the silence doesn't scare you. Wait until your worth isn't measured by strangers. Wait until the mirror you believe in is your own reflection, and then, only then, share, not to be seen, but because you already know you're here. Conflict avoidance, rewrite. You don't say what you really feel, you pause, you rewrite, you soften. You smile through clenched teeth. You say, it's fine. You say, it's not a big deal. You say, maybe I'm just overreacting. But you're not. You're just trying to keep the peace, to smooth the edges, to avoid the explosion you've already played out 100 times in your mind. This is conflict avoidance. But it's not passive. It's a full-time job. You run mental simulations before you speak. You edit your tone, your timing, your phrasing, until your message doesn't sound like yours anymore. Until your truth becomes a whisper, a half sentence, a passing comment you hope they'll decode. But they don't, because you've trained them not to. And deep down, you resent it. You rewrite your thoughts for harmony, but the unsaid begins to build, like pressure behind a dam. It shows up in your shoulders, in the tightness in your jaw, in the fatigue that doesn't go away no matter how much you rest. You dream of shouting, of running, of finally saying the thing, but you wake up silent, because peace has a price, and you've been paying it with your voice. You weren't born this way. Somewhere along the line, you learn that honesty leads to punishment, that expressing discomfort makes people leave, that disagreement is danger. Maybe your parents didn't allow anger. Maybe your friends withdrew when you had needs. Maybe you were told love is fragile and truth is a hammer. So now, You keep the truth locked away. You convince yourself it's kindness, that you're being the bigger person, that silence is strength. But silence can become a cage. And what you don't say doesn't disappear. It festers. It becomes sarcasm, passive aggression, disconnection, and eventually, numbness. Because when you avoid conflict long enough, you stop trusting your own perception. You doubt your instincts. You gaslight yourself before anyone else can. You wonder, am I being too sensitive? Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm the problem. You're not. You're just afraid that being real will cost you connection. But here's the paradox. If you keep rewriting yourself to be loved, then the love you receive isn't real. It's for the mask, the filtered version, the agreeable shadow of you. And that kind of love can never satisfy. Because deep down, it's not truly you they're accepting. And yet, your truth waits. In every missed heartbeat. In every moment you wanted to speak, but didn't. In every sigh you swallowed and every tear you blinked back. It waits in the tension knots, in the migraines, in the dreams where you finally scream. Your body remembers everything your mouth refused to say, but it doesn't have to stay this way. You don't have to scream. You don't have to burn bridges. You just have to start being a little more honest, a little less edited. You can start with, "That hurt me," or "I'm not okay with that," or even just, "Can we talk about this?" Because conflict isn't chaos, it's clarity. It's how real connection is built, not through perfect agreement, but through mutual honesty. And not everyone will handle your truth well. Some people will leave. But if truth breaks something, it was already cracked. Let it break. What survives will be real. What stays will see you, not just your silence. So, the next time you feel yourself about to rewrite, pause. Feel the urge to keep the peace, and ask, at what cost? Because your peace matters too, and your truth, unpolished, unfiltered, unedited, deserves to be heard. Not in a scream, but in a voice that finally remembers how to speak. Permission Gatekeeper script. You could have said yes. You could have let yourself succeed. Let yourself rest. Let yourself feel the joy that rose uninvited for no good reason, but you didn't, because no one else said it first. This is the Permission Gatekeeper script, the quiet, cruel programming that makes you believe your own permission isn't enough, that your dreams, your healing, your pride, your peace only count if someone else nods in approval, so you wait. You wait to be told you're allowed to want more. You wait for someone to declare you ready, good, safe, worthy. You wait to be seen before you believe you exist. You wait for the green light, forgetting that your foot was always on the pedal, and time passes. Not in years, in almosts. Almost started. Almost left. Almost said what mattered. Almost became. Because you thought there was still someone coming. Someone official. A gatekeeper with the authority to hand you your own life. But they never arrive. Because there's no judge, no ceremony, no grand declaration. There's only you and the lie you inherited, that real choices require outside validation. Maybe it started when you were young, when you raised your hand to speak, when you asked to go to the bathroom, when you were praised for waiting your turn. You learned early that authority grants permission, and you absorbed it, not just in school, in your soul. Now you hesitate before everything, before posting, before dancing, before telling someone how you really feel. You hesitate before forgiving yourself, before grieving fully, before loving loudly. You tell yourself you're being cautious, but really, you're listening for a voice that tells you it's okay to be you, and the silence feels like rejection. So you shrink, you edit, you wait, not because you don't know who you are, but because you don't trust that being yourself is allowed. That's what the Gatekeeper script does. It tells you to earn your own freedom, to apply for your own joy, to wait for a yes that's already burning in your chest. It shows up everywhere. In the job you won't leave until someone tells you you're meant for more. In the art you don't share until someone begs to see it. In the love you suppress until someone guarantees you won't be abandoned. You delay your own life because you've outsourced permission. But here's the truth. No one is coming. No one is assigned to hand you your voice. No one is in charge of your becoming. There is no final vote. No stamp of approval, just you. And the moment you decide to believe yourself, that's the fracture point. The script will fight you there. It'll say, "Who do you think you are?" It'll say, "You'll look arrogant. You'll get it wrong." It'll whisper every reason to wait just a little longer. But the wait doesn't end. Because the gatekeeper was never real. You are the gate. You are the lock. You are the key. And the moment you realize that, the whole story changes. You stop asking for applause before you speak. You stop needing consensus to rest. You stop waiting to be seen before you shine. You let yourself laugh fully, cry openly, rest deeply. You say yes without checking first. And maybe the world doesn't notice. Maybe it doesn't applaud. But that's not the point. The point is, you didn't need it to. So, next time joy rises, let it rise. Next time clarity hits, follow it. Next time your soul says go, go. Even if no one claps, even if no one nods, even if it terrifies you. Because waiting for permission is how you stay half alive, and living fully is the most radical rebellion there is. Nostalgia, escape, subroutine. You say you miss the past, the warmth, the light, the laughter. You close your eyes and drift backward to moments that feel golden, soft-edged, untouched by the weight you now carry. You say those were the good days, that you were happy then, that things made more sense. But what if that past never really existed? What if nostalgia is just a subroutine, your mind's escape hatch, triggered when the present becomes too heavy to bear? Because when you're overwhelmed, anxious, heartbroken, you don't lean into now. You reach for then. You search your memory like a comforting playlist, replaying the highlights, skipping the static. But the past is not a recording. It's a story. One your brain has edited over and over until it feels more beautiful than it ever was. You remember the glow, but forget the ache. You remember the closeness, but forget the silence between words. You remember how they looked at you, but not how it ended. Because your brain doesn't store life like a film. It stores it like a myth. It enhances what you crave, erases what you rejected. And when now feels like too much, it offers up a fantasy dressed as history. Not to deceive you, but to soothe you. And still, you ache for it. Not just the places or people, but the version of you that lived back then. You were lighter, weren't you? More open, less guarded. But maybe that's not because life was better. Maybe it's because you hadn't yet learned to close your heart. And now, every time life cracks you open, you look backwards for safety. The past becomes your shelter, but also your cage. You start comparing everything to what came before. Every friendship is less golden. Every moment less pure. Every joy tinged with, it's not how it used to be. You stop living forward and start measuring everything against a memory that might not even be true. And here's the danger. The more you worship the past, the less you inhabit the present. You see it in people who never move on, in the songs they replay, the clothes they still wear, the stories they won't stop telling. They've frozen themselves in a chapter that ended, hoping if they hold on tight enough, they'll time travel back into meaning. But that chapter doesn't want to be reopened. It wants to be honored, then released. Because memory isn't meant to be a home. It's meant to be a guide, a mirror to remind you who you were, so you can better see who you are now. But nostalgia tricks you into believing you've already lived your best life, that everything since has been downhill, that your soul peaked back when things felt simpler. And that belief becomes a trap. Because when you think your joy is behind you, you stop looking for it ahead. You stop trying. You settle. You wait for someone or something to resurrect the feeling you once had, instead of building something new that might be better. Not because it copies the past, but because it dares to move beyond it. Yes, the present hurts. Yes, the world feels colder. But maybe that's not because it's worse. Maybe it's because you're awake. You see more, feel more, carry more. You've grown, and with growth comes grief for everything you used to be. That grief is real. But the past you're mourning, it's not flawless. It had its shadows. You just weren't equipped to name them. And now you are. So maybe the pain you feel isn't about returning to who you were. Maybe it's about becoming who you could be if you stopped living through echoes. Let the past be sacred, but not sovereign. Let memory be a companion, not a destination. You are not meant to shrink into nostalgia. You are meant to breathe through the present, even when it trembles, Because the next moment worth remembering isn't behind you. It's trying to happen now. Resistance to completion. You start things with energy. The idea sparks. The motivation floods in. The vision is clear. You sketch, you draft, you plan, you build. The process excites you until you near the end. And then, without warning, it slows. You distract yourself. You tweak small details endlessly. You tell yourself it's not ready, that it just needs one more pass. Days become weeks. Projects linger half-formed in digital folders, notebooks, rooms you avoid. And deep down, you're not just procrastinating, you're protecting yourself. This is resistance to completion. It's not laziness. It's not lack of discipline. It's survival. Because the moment you finish something, truly finish it, it becomes vulnerable. It can be judged, measured, rejected, mocked, or worse, ignored. As long as it's incomplete, it's safe. Because incomplete things don't belong to the world. They still belong to you. They can't fail. They can't disappoint. They can't reveal what you fear most. That your best effort wasn't enough. That your voice, your vision, your truth won't matter. So your brain stalls. It creates distractions, rationalizations, urgencies that suddenly feel more important. All in service of one core function, protection from being seen. Because to complete something means to declare, this is what I made. This is who I am. This is what I believe. And that kind of visibility, it's terrifying. Especially if you've ever been shamed for expressing yourself. If you've ever shown something you loved and watched it get dismissed. If you've ever shared something vulnerable and got silence in return. Your subconscious remembers, and so it builds walls, but it doesn't stop you from creating entirely. No, it lets you begin. Because beginnings are beautiful. They're full of potential. They can't be wrong yet. You can imagine how good it will be, how proud you'll feel. And in that imagination, you feel like it's already real. But beginnings are easy. Endings are exposure, a finished book, a final painting, a launched idea. That's when the world gets to look. And when the world looks, you become real, not just in your own mind, but in theirs. And real things can be misunderstood. So your brain hesitates. It tries to protect you from heartbreak with a slow drip of delay. But here's what it doesn't understand. Every unfinished thing carries a wound of its own. Every project you leave incomplete becomes a weight you carry. A silent echo of what could have been. A ghost that whispers, maybe I wasn't good enough to finish this. And that ghost multiplies. Until your creative life feels like a graveyard of false starts. Until your confidence erodes. Not because you failed, but because you never dared to finish. But it doesn't have to stay this way. You can train yourself to see completion not as exposure, but as freedom. Because finishing something isn't about perfection. It's about release. It's about saying, this is done. This is enough. This is what I have to say right now, in this moment, and I let it go. Let it be judged. Let it be misunderstood. Let it succeed. Let it fail. Let it breathe. You'll never know what your work really means until it leaves the safety of your mind and enters the messy world of other people. Yes, some will reject it. Yes, some will stay silent. But others will need it. And they can't receive what you never finish. So, next time you find yourself stalling, notice the fear underneath. Name it. Don't shame it. Just say, I see you. I know you're trying to protect me, but I'm not that fragile anymore. And then take the step. Click publish. Call it done. Let it out. Because a finished thing might be judged, but it also might be remembered. It might change someone. It might change you. But that only happens when you choose the risk of visibility over the comfort of safety. And that choice, that's where the real work begins. Clean slate fantasy mode. Sometimes you just want to disappear, not die, not vanish, just reset, start over. Clean slate, new city, new number, new name. You fantasize about it in quiet moments. What if I just walked away from everything? What if I erased it all and began again, untouched, unburdened, unknown? But here's the truth you rarely admit. You don't want freedom. You want amnesia. Because deep down, your mind believes something dangerous, that your pain isn't just something you carry, it's something you are. And if you could delete the past, Maybe you could delete the version of you it created, the one who flinches, who doubts, who hesitates, the one who's shaped by memories you never asked for. This is the clean slate fantasy, and it's not laziness. It's not weakness. It's survival. It's your subconscious trying to escape a maze it can't solve, a maze built from years of patterns, fears, shame, and silent compromises. It says, if I could just start fresh, I'd finally become who I was meant to be. But the maze isn't external, it's you. And wherever you go, the walls follow. You think moving will change you, but the same thoughts arrive with you. The same wounds wake up in new places. The same cravings echo in different relationships. You recreate the same loops with new faces, new addresses, new backstories, because you never actually started over. You just redecorated the trap. The fantasy is beautiful. It feels like control, like freedom, like breath, but it's hollow, because the version of you you're trying to bury is the one that needs your attention the most. The flinching child, the angry teen, the disappointed adult. They aren't flaws. They are evidence. Evidence that you've lived, that you've tried, that you've survived. And trying to erase them is just another form of self-rejection. You don't need to start over. You need to return. Return to the versions of you that got left behind, the pieces you decided were too much, the dreams you outgrew because they hurt to hold, the mistakes you boxed up and buried in silence. You don't heal by running. You heal by remembering, with compassion. That's the opposite of the clean slate fantasy. It's messy, it's painful, it's slow, but it's real. Because starting over doesn't begin in a new place. It begins with a new relationship to what's already happened. You think erasure will make you whole, but wholeness isn't about subtraction. It's about integration. Your past isn't a stain, it's a language. And if you learn to read it, it becomes a map. Yes, some parts will never make sense, some wounds won't heal clean. But you're not here to be perfect. You're here to be honest. And honesty starts when you stop running from your own reflection. You are not broken. You are built from broken things. But that's not the same. And every version of you, especially the ones you want to erase, are waiting to be seen. Not to be rewritten, but to be held. To be told, you were never the problem. The world taught you to fix yourself through flight, to abandon the wreckage and call it growth. To press reset every time the discomfort got too loud. But silence isn't peace. Distance isn't healing. And erasure isn't redemption. It's just delay. You're not here to escape yourself. You're here to meet yourself, fully, finally, without editing. And when you do, when you stop chasing new beginnings and start tending to the unfinished endings, something happens. You don't need a clean slate, because you've made peace with the writing already there. And suddenly, the past loses its grip, not because it's gone, but because you're no longer afraid of what it made you become. You're always upgrading, your skills, your body, your habits, your thoughts, always chasing the next version of yourself, leaner, smarter, calmer, better. And if you're not improving, you start to feel uneasy, restless, behind, like your value is depreciating with every moment you stay the same. This is the constant self-upgrade cycle. And it's slowly erasing you. You think it's discipline, ambition, growth. But beneath it, there's a quiet panic. One that whispers, if I stop evolving, I'll stop mattering. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped believing you were enough as you are. Not broken, not flawed, just overwritten. Not by malice, but by a world that profits off your self-doubt. From the moment you could compare, you were shown better. Better grades, better faces, better jobs, better lives. Improvement was never an invitation. It was a demand. Every flaw was a problem to fix. Every pause was laziness. Every moment of contentment, dangerous, unproductive, weak, and so you internalized it. You turned your entire life into a performance review. You started viewing yourself as a product, constantly in beta, always glitching, always requiring a patch. You don't rest. You optimize. You don't reflect. You recalibrate. You don't exist, you upgrade. Even your self-love becomes conditional. You say, I'll love myself when I'm more confident, when I'm more productive, when I hit the next goal. But the goalpost moves, every time. Because it was never about the goal. It was about escaping the unbearable feeling of being unfinished. But what if you were never broken? What if the software of your self-worth was fine all along, but someone installed an update that said, "You're only valuable if you're improving"? So now, stillness feels like failure. You can't sit in silence without guilt. You can't enjoy what you've built without immediately asking, "What's next?" You can't breathe without wondering if you should be doing more. And even when you achieve, it doesn't land, because your brain is already calculating the next optimization. You are never allowed to arrive, only to chase. But here's the truth you keep running from. Growth without grounding is just another form of escape. And self-worth that depends on self-improvement is not self-worth, it's performance. And performance is exhausting, because real value isn't earned, it's remembered. You were enough before the upgrades, before the goals, before the hustle rewired your nervous system to confuse motion with meaning. The child version of you, unpolished, unsure, unproductive, was still worthy of love, still radiant, still whole, and they still exist inside you, waiting for permission to just be, to laugh without tracking progress, to create without monetizing it, to rest without shame, to feel joy without earning it first. But to get there, you have to unlearn. You have to challenge the algorithm in your mind that says, do more, be more, prove more. You have to slow down long enough to ask, who am I without the upgrades, without the hustle, without the mask of momentum? And if that question terrifies you, you're not alone, because we've built an entire culture on the belief that stagnation is death. But maybe stillness is not death. Maybe stillness is life. Maybe the parts of you that aren't optimized, the messy, soft, unfiltered parts, are the ones closest to your truth. So the next time you feel that itch to improve, pause. Not to stop growing, but to ask, am I doing this because I want to evolve, or because I'm afraid I'm not enough? Because you are, even now, even here, even without the upgrade. Hero complex override. You step in, you help, you fix, you carry others when they fall, you become their shelter, their mirror, their answer, and you tell yourself it's love, it's duty, it's strength. But deep down, something else whispers, that maybe if you can rescue someone else, if you can ease their pain, rewrite their ending, then your own suffering might finally make sense. This is the hero complex override, the quiet internal deal your mind makes. If I save enough people, maybe I won't have to confront what I couldn't save in myself. It starts with empathy. You see someone drowning in the kind of darkness you know too well. You don't hesitate. You dive in, not just to help them breathe, but to prove that someone can make it out alive, that someone can be reached, that someone can be healed. Because if they can be, maybe you could have been too. So you throw your heart into the rescue. You overextend, you overpromise. You don't just help, you become responsible. Their survival becomes proof that your suffering wasn't meaningless, that it forged you into something noble, necessary, useful. But there's a cost, because underneath the cape, you're still bleeding. And you don't stop to stitch the wound, because stopping would mean sitting with the pain. And that's not the story heroes tell. Heroes keep moving. Heroes push through. Heroes don't fall apart. You're not trying to be seen. You're trying to be redeemed. For the things you couldn't fix. For the younger version of you who was abandoned, misunderstood, unheard. You tell yourself, if I save enough people, maybe that lost part of me will forgive me. But the truth is brutal. You can't save others to escape your own healing. You can't outsource meaning to their recovery. And you can't keep proving your worth through sacrifice. That's not heroism. That's avoidance. And it's seductive because the world rewards you for it. People praise your strength. They lean on you. They tell you how much you've changed their lives. But they don't see the exhaustion, the hollow moments, the nights you cry alone after playing the unbreakable one. Because being the hero feels safer than being honest. And deep down, you're terrified of what might surface if you stopped helping long enough to feel your own need. You've made a purpose out of tending to others. But what if the one thing you won't do, the one person you won't turn toward, is you? What if being the hero isn't your highest self, but you're most afraid? Afraid to look inward. Afraid to admit you're still carrying wreckage. Afraid to stop saving others and start healing the version of you who never got saved. But you deserve rescue too. Not through applause, not through service. through stillness, through surrender, through the terrifying act of not being useful and still believing you have worth. That's the override. That's when you stop letting pain dictate your mission, when you stop needing others' wounds to justify your own, when you stop building identity on broken people and start becoming whole even when no one needs saving. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start including yourself in the care. It means you ask not just, who can I hold up, but who holds me? And when the answer is silence, you stay. You feel it. You let the hero mask fall. You let the ache rise. And you finally stop running. Because the pain was never meant to be redeemed through others. It was meant to be faced. By you. For you. And maybe, once you've done that, you'll help again. But not because you're trying to justify the wound. Because you've already healed it. Legacy anxiety, driver. You say you want to make an impact, leave a mark. Build something that lasts. You chase success, legacy, memory, some kind of echo that survives after you're gone. But what if that hunger isn't purpose at all? What if it's fear, disguised as ambition? You're haunted by the idea of disappearing. Not just dying, but vanishing. Being forgotten, as if none of this ever mattered. As if your name will fade, your face will blur. Your voice will stop echoing the moment you go silent. And so, your mind invents meaning. It creates urgency. It pushes you to accomplish, to build, to be seen. You don't just want to live, you want to be remembered, immortalized. You tell yourself it's about purpose, about contribution. But beneath the surface, it's about fear. Because what happens if none of it lasts? What if everything you've poured yourself into fades like smoke? What if your name is only ever spoken by people who never knew you? What if, in 100 years, not a single person thinks of you at all? That thought terrifies you. So, you overcompensate. You fill calendars, chase metrics, leave digital footprints, carve your name into your work like it'll keep you real. You want your life to matter so badly that you start equating visibility with value. You start calling productivity purpose. You call urgency meaning. But that's not meaning. That's anxiety, dressed as legacy. The mind can't bear impermanence. It hates the idea that one day you'll be dust, that your memories will fade, that the people you love will forget the sound of your laughter. So it builds narratives. It chases after things that feel lasting. Careers, children, creations, accolades, anything that says, I was here. But meaning forced through fear doesn't nourish the soul. It drains it. You wake up tired because you're running from vanishing. You stay busy not because the work fulfills you, but because the silence would remind you of the void. You say you're building a future, but part of you is just trying to outpace oblivion, and still, the fear lingers, because deep down, you know the truth. All things pass. The greatest names become lines in books. The greatest works decay. Time doesn't preserve, it erases. Slowly, softly, relentlessly. Even stars die, and you, beautiful, complex, terrified you want to believe you're an exception, but you're not. And that realization hurts. It cuts deep. It breaks something. Because if legacy is just a myth to calm the chaos, then what's the point? The point is now. Not in the story they'll tell after you're gone, but in the breath you're taking right now. You're not here to be remembered. You're here to experience, to feel deeply, to love fiercely, to touch this world not to stain it with your name, but to know it, even for a moment. Legacy is not the echo. It's the contact. The way you made someone feel safe when they were breaking. The way you laughed on the worst day of your life. The stillness you felt watching the light shift through a window. Those moments don't get written into history, but they are the reason you were here. You don't need to be remembered forever to matter now. Let go of the idea that permanence is proof. Let go of the chase to be eternal. You are a flicker, and that is enough. The sunset doesn't last, the song ends, the fire burns out, and none of it is wasted. You were never meant to defeat time. You were meant to belong to it, and the more you grip legacy, the more you lose presence. So stop writing eulogies while you're still alive. Stop rehearsing your myth while missing your moment. The fear of vanishing will not go away, but it doesn't have to own you. You can feel it, name it, and still choose to live, not for the echo, but for the flame.